Okay. Good evening, everyone. It's 7:33 on Tuesday, March 3rd, 2026, and I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Board of Finance to order. The first item on our agenda, as always, is public comment. If anybody would like to come up and make a public comment, please step up, and if there's more than one, just write your name on the pad at the end of the table. Okay, there being none, we're going to move on to our action items today. So tonight is the first Tuesday of March, which outlined in the charter is a day in which we officially receive the proposed fiscal 2027 budgets from both the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Education. We had a drawing ahead of time, and we determined that the Board of Ed would go first. So, Dr. Byrne, Rob, would you like to?
I'm just going to leave that down.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to present the Board of Education's fiscal 27 budget to the Board of Finance tonight. This budget is the culmination of a rigorous and thorough budget process at the Board of Education table. I would like to thank our administration, led by Dr. Eric Byrne, Marge Sion, Dr. Amy Fettigan, Shirley Klein, and Rich Rudel. And thank you to my fellow Board of Education members, David Brown, Jonathan Dunn, Greg Grambling, Katie Lublin, Dennis Maroney, Sarah Parent, William Vredenberg, and Joanna Walsh. During this budget process, we work to ensure that the budget effectively allocates the resources needed to support our strategic goals and meet the needs of our students while maintaining fiscal responsibility to our taxpayers. Our fiscal 27 proposed Board of Education budget will allow us to support the education of 4,441 students ranging in age from 3 to 22 years old, employ over 800 personnel, manage ongoing contract negotiations with 7 unions, and maintain 8 facilities with over 900,000 square feet of building space and over 100 acres of property. The fiscal 27 BOE recommended budget of $130,179,922 represents a budget increase of 3.51% over the previous year's operating budget. The fiscal 27 capital budget request is $1.9 million, roughly. Moving on. When compared to the past 10 years of budget increases, the fiscal 27 BOE approved budget of 3.51% is the lowest budget increase since fiscal 2021 and is lower than the 10-year average of 3.65%. I would also like to highlight that we were able to reduce the initial fiscal 27 superintendent proposed budget from 3.88% to a 3.51% budget increase as a result of a board-approved early retirement incentive program. When compared to other DIRG A fiscal 27 budget requests, Darienne's BOE approved budget is the lowest budget percentage increase relative to our DIRG A peer districts. The average budget increase of DIRG A school districts is 4.27%, with the majority ranging from 3.91% to 5.63%. I'm sure the Board of Finance has watched our budget meeting discussions over the past 2 months, so I will keep this high level and focus on the budget highlights and budget drivers over the following slides to ensure that we use everyone's time efficiently. Of the overall budget increase of 3.51%, salaries represent the largest driver of growth, accounting for 2.28%. For context, salaries and benefits of our 800 employees comprise 80% of the total budget and are largely driven by multi-year negotiated contracts. Enrollment-driven changes represent 0.25% of the growth. Operating expenses offset the other budget categories with a reduction of negative 0.65% savings compared to the prior year. Fixed equipment and revenue represents 0.83% growth, and new initiatives are 0.8% of the budget growth. The fiscal 27 budget development process focused on ensuring that the budget aligns with our strategic goals and educational priorities. One of the most important strategic goals of our district is enhancing teaching and learning. This budget allocates resources targeted at helping us to most effectively achieve this most important educational priority to benefit our students. The addition of 5 instructional coaches will provide job-embedded executive coaching for our teachers to strengthen elementary teaching and learning. This budget also allocates resources to support implementation of the data-driven multi-tiered systems of support, or MTSS framework, which addresses academic, behavioral, and social personal learning needs for all K-12 students. Another important priority for our district is teacher recruitment and retention. The DEA teacher contract enhancements provide new in-service professional learning opportunities while also increasing budget predictability. The budget also includes the addition of a public information coordinator to improve communication, community engagement, and create greater transparency. The budget includes a redesign of school security with a transition to a contracted security provider. In special education, we have students returning to district and aging out. We are continuing Orton-Gillingham training for special education staff to support students with dyslexia and other language-based learning differences. In mental health, we are continuing support for the Teen Talk program and DHS Wellness Center due to ongoing student need. I would like to thank the Community Fund and Town of Darien for their past grant support of the Teen Talk program. Technology needs include new technology for students and staff, and we also have new software to support AI integration into teaching and learning. I also want to highlight the employee benefits as we are transitioning to a self-insured health insurance model to better manage escalating insurance costs. We have also changed the health insurance plan design to a $3,000, $6,000 deductible and prior authorizations for prescriptions. To get into the budget drivers specifically, salaries expenses are a key driver of the overall budget, with an overall budgeted increase of 2.28%. The DEA teacher contract represents the primary driver of budget growth. It is important to note that in addition to enhancements in the DEA contract to help with teacher recruitment and retention, the new DEA contract also created a more fiscally responsible salary schedule that provides the district with more budget predictability from year to year. Turnover and salary savings reflects a negative 0.96% reduction in overall budget growth. This assumes turnover of 35 teachers and 15 paraprofessionals, which is consistent with our experience this year. Turnover salary savings also reflects incremental projected salary savings due to 12 teachers participating in the early retirement incentive program. The growth in the extended school year program is due to more days in June 26. Another key driver of the budget is projected enrollment, which accounts for a 0.25% increase in the budget. These enrollment-driven changes include, at the elementary level, 2 new teachers at Holmes and Hindley. At the middle school, there is a decrease of 1 foreign language teacher due to decreased enrollment. At Darien High School, there is a decrease of 1.2 FTEs due to fewer class sections, but there is no impact on programming. This is solely due to enrollment decreases. In special education and ELP, there's an addition of 1.2 FTE based on IEP needs. And special education student transportation has an additional 2 drivers in the budget to expand our in-house special education transportation program, which continues to provide significant savings. Thank you to the Board of Finance for supporting this program. Operating expenses accounts for a negative 0.65% reduction in the overall budget. Key highlights driving this reduction include a negative 0.67% change in special education expenses due to reduced out-of-district tuition and contracted services. There's an additional negative 0.1% change due to a reduction primarily in textbook expenses. Other items driving operating expenses include the continued support of the Teen Talk program, software contractual increases, an unfunded state mandate for composting, and teacher tuition reimbursement, which is part of the DEA contract. Fixed cost equipment and revenue account for 0.83% of the budget growth. Key drivers include transportation costs, which reflect a 7% contractual increase with first student transportation, and a state-mandated transition to propane buses. Utilities costs have increased due to regulatory changes, which resulted in our electricity supplier rate rising by 30% since last year. Employee benefits reflects the continued escalation of health insurance costs. And as I had mentioned, in order to counteract these trends, we are transitioning to a self-insurance model and have made healthcare plan design changes, which will reduce projected costs significantly relative to our current health insurance plan. And just as a note, if we had kept our current insurer plan, it would have added an additional $1 million to the fiscal 27 budget. So the move to self-insurance over the next 3 years is projected to generate significant savings. Technology equipment reflects replacement of aging and deferred technology equipment. And then revenue increases include, for instance, the Turkey Bowl that will be next year as well. New initiatives account for 0.8% of budget growth. As I had mentioned earlier, the addition of 5 elementary instructional coaches are a proven effective way to help our teachers strengthen elementary teaching and learning. The addition of the public information coordinator will improve our communications and transparency and community engagement. And the security redesign in moving to a contracted security provider will provide a comprehensive range of security support, including an on-site director of security from the contracted provider. Additionally, there's new software for AI in this budget. Before I discuss the proposed fiscal 27 capital improvement projects, I want to thank the Board of Finance for your ongoing support of our school's capital needs, and specifically for funding the Hindley, Holmes, Royal, and Ox Ridge building projects. We're excited to have our HHR school renovations finished this summer. We held our annual facilities tour in December to review the fiscal 27 proposed capital improvement projects at each of the schools. Thank you to the Board of Finance members who were able to attend. Our fiscal 27 capital improvement projects are a total of $1,915,550. 60% of the proposed capital projects are for paving at Darien High School and at Hindley, Holmes, and Royal, for paving that was not included as part of the HHR project. We are recommending replacements of gymnasium floors at Hindley and Royal, and also included are school radio replacements and bollards for the HHR schools. The central office has in this budget a new generator automatic transfer switch replacement. And in terms of district-wide needs, there is an addition of a replacement cycle item for custodial floor scrubbers, vehicle replacement of a 2007 truck, security cameras, server, and licensing that are part of a hardware replacement cycle, and 2 additional Suburbans for our special education in-house transportation program due to increased students attending outplaced transition programs. In conclusion, I want to thank you for your consideration of the BOE Fiscal 27 proposed operating budget and capital improvement projects. This budget was unanimously approved by the Board of Education, and in a time of increasing cost pressures statewide, We believe that this proposed budget balances fiscal responsibility to our taxpayers while allowing us to continue to provide our students with the high-quality curriculum, instruction, and extracurricular programming that have sustained Darien School's reputation for excellence in education. We are proud of the investments that we have made in our schools over the years and would like to thank the Board of Finance for your ongoing support of our students and schools. We are ready to answer any questions you may have on the budget from this point forward, and thank you in advance for the important taxation work that you will all begin tonight for our town. Thank you for your time. And there's an appendix with additional information as well. I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has questions.
Does anyone have questions?
I do.
Paul?
On, I think it is page 6 under teacher recruitment and retention. Could you go through some of the programs or other types of incentives to help recruitment and retention? And then a second question, you said the new DEA contract helps in budget predictability, if you'd touch on that.
So in the DEA contract, there were a number of incentives that were included as part of that contract. One was what I had mentioned, which was the in-service for professional development that the district will run in areas that we find need, and then that allows the teachers to gain additional credits that would help them to move up the salary schedule instead of having to pay for outside professional development or certification in other places. Also, there's an attendance incentive for teachers where if they have, I don't remember the exact number of absences, maybe 2 absences in a semester, will get a $500 bonus basically. And the way that actually is cost effective for us is because the overall absentee rate, and when you include the building substitutes, et cetera,
Yeah.
it is more than break even. And the good thing is that if we're able to increase teacher attendance, that's better for our students because it is consistent and the expertise of the teachers that we'd like to have in the schools. Additionally, we included a greater level of tuition reimbursement for teachers that are getting taking additional coursework outside of the school. I think it had not been raised in a number of years, and so they increased the rate at which they would be reimbursed. I don't remember some of the other incentives, but on the salary schedule, there were changes that were made in order to make it more predictable, and I believe it was basically a change in a dollar level per salary step as opposed to a percentage, which, as the teachers went through the steps, ended up making it more predictable for us. And then also changes were made on the back end. We have a kind of a longevity incentive that is essentially kind of an off-grid incentive, not dissimilar, I think, to what New Canaan does, but it helps us also to retain our very good teachers that we would love to have stay around. So those were just some of the items, and I'm sure Rich could provide some more detail if you would like
Okay.
on the teacher contract.
I've got another one, but this is for Rich. Unfunded mandates aren't a favorite of mine. I noticed 30,000 in there for composting. Could you touch on public benefits and how much impact that is on our electricity budget for the schools? If you have the number, just.
Rich, I think both of those are on.
So the public benefit charge is about $90,000 of additional cost to electricity. One of the other things that's really impacted us is state of Connecticut imposed something called the day after service for supply rates, and so that's one of the driving increases in our electric costs. So it used to be that you could lock into a supply rate, you knew what your supply rate was going to be. Electric companies like Eversource now can essentially change that supply rate based on whatever the market is at that time, and so one of the things that we've seen driving up cost of electricity is also that.
Okay. I'd like to encourage everybody to contact our state legislators to let them know our dissatisfaction with unfunded mandates.
I have one question on the healthcare in terms of the self-insurance. Could you maybe talk about exactly what that is in terms of, and where we're funding the self-insurance from? Or is this just really, are we resetting the level at which we're underwriting the deductible effectively?
So we'll create what's called an internal services fund. And so what you see in the operating budget is a contribution into the internal services fund. And so we're taking that revenue from the budget, putting it into the internal services fund to fund expenses, claims that come in. One of the benefits about being self-insured is when you're fully insured and you get rebates for RX costs, that goes to the insurance provider. When you're self-insured, you actually get those rebates yourself. And so one of the reasons why we chose to go self-insured next year, and we really couldn't do it in the past, is we had a lot of high claims, but we didn't really have that much in terms of RX costs. We've seen that kind of level up where the RX costs have risen dramatically. We've gotten past some of those high claimants for medical claims, and so now with that kind of switch in the mix of costs associated with medical insurance, having those rebates come to us is about a $600,000 credit just in the first year, and so that's one of the bigger benefits. And so when you have an internal services fund, that revenue will hit that fund, expenses get paid out. The hope is that obviously your revenue exceeds your expenses, and that's what builds your fund balance. So similar like the cafeteria fund, you would build a fund balance over time and then carry that fund balance going forward, so that when you do have years, let's say when the expenses exceed the claims, you can hit your fund balance, so that'll soften that blow, and then you want to carry that fund balance going forward.
And what is the deposit to the internal services fund?
So it's about $18 million.
18 million. And then that internal fund, is that a lapsing fund or a non-lapsing fund?
It's non-lapsing.
Non-lapsing.
Yep.
Managed.
And is the only thing that fund can be used for is to specifically pay medical expenses?
So medical, dental, vision claims, anything related to employee benefits.
And
And
Rich,
that's- Go ahead.
Sorry.
No.
did we put a stop loss?
So we'll have 2 stop loss policies. We'll have an individual stop loss at $250,000. So what that means is we're on the hook for the first $250,000. If somebody has catastrophic claims, then the individual stop loss will kick in. We're also going to take what's called an aggregate stop loss policy, and so that's essentially looks at 20% of your corridor. So if claims exceed 20% of expectations when we do underwrite those claims, typically in May, your maximum exposure in that year is that 20%, and we'll pay premiums for that.
So,
And in terms of the $18 million deposit, how was that, who actually calculated that deposit?
So we use Brown & Brown, who's our insurance consultant. So what they do is they look at your current claims, they look at your trailing 18 months of claims. They look at claims that they expect to kind of pair off over time depending on what the claim is about. And they'll look at your mix of population, your census of your population, and then that's how they build it. And then they'll go to market for us for individual stop loss and aggregate stop loss.
Okay. And then last one on that, in terms of that non-lapsing account, how will you direct the investment of those proceeds?
So the money still sits with the town. It's not like the Board of Ed's going to create like a new bank account at a separate bank. So we do what's called the Town Board of Ed reconciliation. And so similar to the cafeteria fund, we'll have an account that's set up that we'll report out on every month. And those funds are still within like the town's bank account. So we're not investing them separately.
Okay. So in terms of your expected drawdown, do you expect that 18 million will be drawn down sort of steadily over time?
So
Could
typically
that
what
be
you-
up and down depending on?
So typically what you do is like 1/12, so every
Yep.
month you're gonna put in 1/12 of whatever that $18 million is. And then also obviously the employee contributions go in there, and then we have some like TRB contributions and smaller revenues that go in there, and then that would be spread out over the course of the 12 months.
Got it. And Josh, do we know if those investment proceeds from that is included in the town's budget?
I don't know if they're included in, but if you're funding it, the plan is to fund it.
It's funded from the operating account, so it's whatever you're using the operating account
So it won't
for.
be that much
Okay.
cash there.
I just want to say thank you, first of all, for pursuing this. Like, I know we've talked about it for years, and thank you so much for doing the work and getting it done. I love the way you've structured it. I guess we'll talk about it offline, but I do think it's odd that it wouldn't be segregated. And, I mean, if it's going to be managed by the treasurer and it's for this purpose, it's going to be a whole lot easier to track our performance, I would think, if it's segregated.
The fund itself will be segregated. It'll be its
Okay.
own fund outside of the general fund.
Okay, that's good. And do we have rules about what it can be invested in? And is it the treasurer that makes those investment decisions?
Well, I think it's just part of the general appropriation. So like when we appropriate 100 and however many million, that all sits on our balance sheet, and then they just draw it down effectively as needed.
But it should be invested while it's sitting there.
It is.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Right, so
Yeah.
who's making those decisions? The treasurer?
Treasurer.
Okay, and is it constrained exactly the same way the general fund is, I guess?
Just a quick question for me. Any ideas what's driving the high school 40 reduction?
So it's the small cohorts that you had about 7 or 8 years ago in the elementary schools, and now they've kind of made their way up to the high school. And so now if you look at the elementary school, we have a bigger cohort at the elementary school. So in 7 or 8 years, you'll see that high school number actually tick back up.
Thank you.
Can we talk about the early retirement plan that was offered and the assumptions that were made surrounding savings?
Sure. So we expect to save about $1.3 million over the life of the current teacher contract, and for the payment of $450,000. So it's about an $860,000 savings. So there are 12 teachers who elected to take it. They range from high school teachers to elementary teachers. Typically, like an elementary classroom teacher, we expect to save more. A high school teacher who might teach like science or tech ed, typically the savings is less. One of the reasons we look to do it this year is teachers who are hired for the next school year get prior authorization in health insurance, and so it helps speed up the return that we're going to get for those employees going to prior RX. And so it's a combination of salary savings and then insurance savings, and then looking at that against what it would be for the teachers who otherwise would have stayed.
So it does assume rehiring all the ones?
Correct.
Okay.
On the turnover and the salary savings, you'd mentioned, I think, Robin mentioned 35 teachers and 15 paras where they assumed sort of turnover. Are the 12 that took the early retirement, are those included as part of that, or is that in addition to that?
In addition to.
Okay.
And so that's a normal assumption to make, is that the experience will be the same despite 12 early retirements?
So typically, what you get is the teachers who are leaving are all on the top step across the board in different lanes. The teachers that we're expecting to hire will be a mix of new teachers and teachers who have probably 10 or 11 years of experience, depending on the subject matter.
But I mean, are we still, with 12 being kind of
Oh, on top of the
out?
35?
Yeah, I mean,
no.
it seems like we'd have a lower turnover.
No, I would think it's about the same, because a lot of times when we have turnover, it's not just teachers who retire. It's teachers who choose maybe to go to like Westport or New Canaan or whatever it might be,
Right.
or teachers who leave the profession. So while the number of 47 seems like a little higher, it is in line with what we've seen when we've had prior early retirement centers.
Okay. Is there any reduction in PLC days because of all these changes?
There'll certainly be a reduction in the elementary release days. I think we have 9 right now between late arrivals and early release. That will not exist in the calendar next year because of the job embedded work of the coaches.
Great. And that savings is reflected, if there is any, I assume?
There really isn't any because there's still
Still the day.
it's still a work day, but it will be more time in school for kids. So
Yeah.
any of those releases are not on the table anymore.
Thanks. Are there any AI savings reflected in this budget?
Not yet.
Only
We do have
cost.
2 software, AI software that we're planning to purchase next year and implement. So not yet.
One quick last one. ELP psychologist, .2, is that once a week then? They're coming?
It's 1 day. So we currently have an ELP psychologist who's .8, so they work 4 days a week. This would make them 5 days a week.
In terms of the ECR grant, what's your assumption for this budget versus what this year is pointing towards?
So we assume 70%
70.
as the reimbursement rate. This year, it looks like it's at 68%.
This might be more for you, Robin. Feels a little bit like shuffling deck chairs, but bollards and gym floors for capital, like if we had money left over with HHR,
Yeah, we were just talking about that. We'll look at that.
thank you.
I think the question was relating to some of the things that are happening at H and R in this capital budget. Could those be included in the kind of $4 million-ish of surplus that we have across the 3 schools right now.
I think if the building committee were in support of that, it certainly
Yeah.
could. I think at the last go-around, they were not items at that point that were considered part of the project, but if the building committee changes their mind, it certainly could be.
Yeah, I think it'll be something I probably bring up to the board, because we have that savings, as you said, about 4.5. Some of it's been allocated already for some work, but I don't see why
Yeah,
not, so do some lobbying on that one.
It seemed that as we think about things that are sort of need to have versus possibly alternatives, if they're in this budget, they, you know, by definition, they're need to haves.
Yep.
Robin, could you describe the coach's function, and also, are they available?
I believe Dr. Byrne has worked extensively with instructional coaches in his past years in other districts, and could probably speak to this much more eloquently.
So coaches would be working with teachers side by side in the classroom. They'd also be working with them outside of the classroom for planning. And they would be working with groups of teachers. So you may have 2 teachers observing a coach that's modeling lessons in the classroom. So that's sort of the model they're pushing in to work with the teachers, and they're planning with them. In terms of are they available, we believe they are. We've got a posting out there. We put an anticipated posting yesterday, and we have a number of applicants already. So just to see what the landscape is. So there is a certification area in Connecticut for coaches, but we do believe that there are skilled people out there that would be interested in coming and joining us.
Is the coaching more focused on junior teachers?
No, it's really on all teachers. So,
Okay.
you know, it's not, you know, sometimes you get junior teachers who are highly skilled. Sometimes those are your more veteran teachers, but it depends on where the needs are. And the focus is really on improving teacher skill and increasing teacher knowledge. And that will be the work of the coaches.
Thank you.
Yes.
During your budget discussions, you guys talked about the behavior assessment system the state is no longer paying for. How much does that cost? What did they, and why did they stop?
I think it's about 30,000.
About $30,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think, I forget now the details, but we're essentially gonna do it ourselves? Is that basically what we're?
Well, we're required to do it. So, yeah, we're looking at a couple of different instruments to use, and that is the estimate on the costs. I was really struck. I had an opportunity to speak to the Darien Men's Association last week, and I did share that one of the first packets of information I received was from the state on all of the mandates, and it's 60 pages long. 60 pages of mandates, many of which are not funded at all.
Dr. and I watched that. That was super impressive. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And yes, I've been talking about mandates, I think, for the last 8 years on this. I thought my estimate last year was like 350 of
Yeah.
unfunded.
60
mandates.
pages.
60 pages. I know your expression was priceless. Can I ask I know you came from the Rye School District. Any idea what you guys were paying per pupil in terms of spending? Just round number? Okay, I'm just looking at like our dirt.
It was in the mid-30s, about
Yeah,
35, 36,000.
Okay.
Yeah. I will say just a funny story. A former colleague of mine, a superintendent from Westchester County, he was also a musician, and he had a band, and they called themselves the Unfunded Mandates. And they played a lot of school events in Westchester.
Well, thank you again.
I have to,
That was fantastic.
praise this whole budget and process. You guys, I know, I heard other people commenting on it. I could not believe how well that went. I mean, great job to all of you. Thank you. It was, I mean, like nothing I've seen in, I don't know, 10 years that I've been involved.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the administration and Dr. Byrne also for the very well-done budget from the very beginning. So, thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you guys very much.
No more questions?
Yeah, and I
All right.
think that's it. I think from our side, you know, we will, I'm sure we'll have some questions and so forth on things that we're maybe looking for some more information on or just more explanation of, and we'll work to get them to you, and, you know, you can sit down and meet and or thread you into one of our upcoming meetings when we go through the school budget, which I think is more in the middle of our sort of cadence this year as opposed to being at the back end. But we'll make sure we keep open communication.
Great,
Absolutely.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
State passes always well within the
The fact that you can't lock in or hedge the supply rate, but you can the actual, the delivery.
Oh, I didn't know we were doing town budget tonight. Oh, boy. I don't know why I didn't have that segregated. I should put it in a separate issue, a separate line
Yeah.
item, huh?
And then there were three.
I feel a little bit like Haydn's.
a clear room, Joan.
I feel a little bit like Haydn's Farewell Symphony, where the musicians sort of leave the stage, and it's just sort of, you know.
Let the record show that there's only one unpaid guest in our audience.
Exactly. So, on that happy note, thank you, friends, for your time this evening, and I'll take you through a few highlights of the town or Board of Selectmen budget this evening. This page here provides a summary of where we've ended up for really everything except Board of Education. And so one of the things that's unique about the presentation every year is that we'll start off and we have the budget that we directly control as the Board of Selectmen, but there's other things that are added in there that make up what's essentially the net town budget that excludes everything except the Board of Education. So for this year, the Board of Selectmen budget is up 5.5%. That compares with about 4.8% last year, and I'll go through some of the differences that have accounted for that. Library up about 3.3%. Debt service, with which you're very familiar, up 16% this year for total expenditure growth of 8.2%. We've had other revenues coming up this year, combination of a variety of things, 11.1%. Investment income is going to be down, at least budgeted, to $2.4 million from $3.9 million for a total net town budget increase of 11.5%. So if I break down the sources of change in the Board of Selectmen budget, so about 50% of that change is in what I call personnel expenses. So these are salaries, largely union driven, medical insurance, and those two together, which really account for everything that we spend on personnel, constitute half of the increase that we're asking for versus last year. A new grant this year that we have considered at the board level and would ask you all to consider is for Post 53. That's $360 million. I'll get into that. And then, sorry, 360,000. And then I've got several others. It's been a long day for a variety of reasons. And I got several others that constitute about a third of the increase from our solid waste disposal contract, the library itself, which I mentioned before, Social Security, overtime, a few other things that I will describe now in more detail. So if you look at just the salary increases in medical insurance, for salary increases, these are about $429,000 of that is for full-time employees. $35,000 is for part-time. We decided this year to raise the salaries of or the hourly rates for our part-time employees, largely reflecting the state of Connecticut change in minimum wage. We've also had some increase in holiday pay, and this 166 that you see, that in part is the set aside that we put each year to cover contractual pay increases that take place during the fiscal year. For medical insurance, we are still considering some options there. So this increase that you see here reflects the worst case, as our town insurance broker has described, from United Healthcare. The town broker recommends that we shop our plan. The experience rating for the town's plan has actually improved at the front end of this fiscal year, and so they're in the process of shopping that, and let's see what they come up with. But we do expect to actually have a decision on that for you all to consider, certainly for the RTM consider before they vote on May 11th. Next up is this Post 53 grant. Have they come to present to you yet? Okay, so the leadership of the board, they're going to come by and talk to you about this. And what you have up here are a set of rationales for that grant request. Historically, as you know, Post 53 has been self-funded through donations. They also have an endowment, much like the library does. And if you look at what they told us here, which you can see printed up on the screen, that they have had pretty substantial call volume increases since COVID times, as much as 70% higher for assisted living. Our students that constitute the volunteers for the organization have higher demands on their schedules, which reduces the amount of time that they have available for post-53 activities. In addition, our adult advisors are under a lot of what they're calling administrative pressure. And in addition, they've got ongoing operating losses, which are going to be larger this coming year. And they do have a substantial endowment, but they are likely to draw on that endowment to replace the facility that's over there at the parking lot. That building is, I think, 30 or 40 years old and is not meeting their needs anymore. So that's the reason that they came by for this grant. The grant is carefully tailored and only covers the salary and benefit expenses for 4 employees. So Joe Larchevek, who's the executive director, he used to be shared with Stanford, and that's since changed now. He's now full-time with the town of Darien, so we no longer share those expenses, as well as some part-time roles which really need to be filled now that the Post 53 has gotten larger and more substantial. And as I said before, the adult advisors were under a lot of administrative burden to do some of the work that you see there. And by having these part-time roles, it allows them to more aggressively cover that so that those adult advisors are freed up for EMS and Post 53 work. So long story short, when they presented that, we asked a lot of questions. It felt compelling to us. We don't like to grant new things like that, but Post 53 is a pretty important part of the town fabric and plays a valuable role in many different ways. And we felt in the end that that was the right thing to do to approve their grant request of $360,000. One of the good things about that being focused only on personnel is that's going to be a grant that we'll have a much easier time of managing, because these are going to be percentage increases in salaries as opposed to unexpected aspects that you might see in a budget, which still remain the responsibility of the endowment and their fundraising. Next up is sort of a hodgepodge of things here, but they are the largest components of our sources of change in the town budget. So as in prior years, the solid waste disposal costs continue to go up, but at the same time, we have managed to implement tipping fee increases. And so it's not shown as a net figure against that, but those increases net will cover this budget. For Social Security, we had some calculation methodologies that were not quite right. They got overcorrected, and it led to a small deficit in that, and that's why if you were to compare this spike in Social Security expenses against the actual salary increases, which in a municipality they all kind of match up because of the way people are paid, it should be about the same percentage increase, and you'll notice that it's not, and that's the reason for that. We would like to hire a new deputy fire marshal to come on board in January. This is driven by the growth in commercial really developments over the past few years, because when those developments come online, you have to have a fire marshal inspections of those, and that's a durable inspection responsibility. Those fire marshals have to conduct inspections of those facilities going forward. And so as we've become larger and had more of these types of developments, the demands on the fire marshal's office to get those inspections done properly has grown, and that's the reason for introducing this. Police overtime rounds out the increase, driven by training and other activities that the department has that takes officers offline, and so that's where that increase has come from. The only other one to mention there is you'll see a drop-off in retirement funding of $398,000. So those of you familiar with the town and police pension boards, they have a rolling 5-year average that's used to determine the actuarial contributions into the retirement funds. And so every year, of course, those rolling 5 years of returns, the oldest one will drop off and you replace it with a new one. Well, the one that's dropped off was a less strong investment year. And so because of that, in the recalculation of those required, to meet the recalculations required to meet those investment returns, you're going to need less of a contribution because they're based on a now stronger rolling average that includes that weaker year. So not to bring up the explanation of that, but one thing I wanted to stress is that as a town, certainly when I was doing that, we always fund the actuarially recommended amount. This is not mean that we're cutting that for some reason or deviating from their recommendation. This is all formulated and determined by professionals. We're not a town that short funds our employee retirement funds. So this is a chart just showing the sources of change in debt service. What you see here is last year's debt service or current fiscal year of $15.6 million. Sources of change is the $3.7 million increase. And again, this is debt service, P&I. That is just an estimate right now. That's going to be finalized by the bonding work that you guys are going to do in April. But that's our best estimate of what that cost will be. The slight decrease is unusual in the sense that not all of our prior bond issuances have level principal and interest funding. And there's a few in there that have had drop-offs in the service to those debts. And when you take that into account, I just thought it was useful to highlight that particular aspect of our portfolio of bonds, if you will, and to just recognize that in this particular case, there's a few that have drop-offs in the debt service required for those particular issuances. And as a reminder, in terms of our total debt, as well as the debt service, it's about half and half between schools and town, even with Great Island. But now with HHR, the schools are responsible for about half of the total down debt, and the town is the other half. Next up is investment income, and you can see what's budgeted and versus what's actual over the last few years. Last year's budget, I think the treasurer started at $3 million and ended with a $3.3 million request. This board added $550,000 for anticipated earnings on bond proceeds. So these are bonds that fund, but for which expenditures have not been drawn against, and so those investment proceeds come from investing those funds while we wait to spend them. And this board will probably need to do that again because Jones' forecast do not include any assumptions for bond earnings proceeds in her forecast. I guess the only other thing just to point out is that it's a pretty big drop from $3.85 million to $2.4 million. And not to point out the obvious, but we're in a constrained interest rate environment, and that's figured into her calculations as to why she's recommending a budget of $2.4 million.
What was the actual investment for 27 investment income?
Oh, the actual, that's just through 6 months, so that so you can't annualize that as much as she's reminded me, but if you did, that would suggest sort of in the zip code of $4 million. Oh, that's shifted up wrong. That's shifted up wrong. I'm sorry, that should be down a figure. That's my mistake. That 2.14 million, that is fiscal 26 year to date. So shift those figures down, that's my mistake.
And so what is budgeted for
What's budgeted?
fiscal 27?
Fiscal 27, the recommended budget is 2.4 million. The budget for this current fiscal year is 3.85 million, and earnings to date for this fiscal year are 2.124 million.
So the annualized amount is?
4-ish. So, I mean, we'll see. I mean, interest rates continue to fall, but if it continues on track, yeah, you should make this year's investment budget.
So John, the 4.273 should just be
Yes.
in the 2 point, those should just be pushed
That
down.
will be dropped down, yeah. Okay. Sorry about that. All right. In terms of major capital projects, so in terms of reserve for capital non-recurring expenses, in other words, capital projects we would not bond. So this year, our paving budget, relatively consistent with prior years. One increase this year is for sidewalks for $1 million. I'm about to launch the sidewalk committee that we're going to charter to take a look at sidewalk infrastructure in town. And this is both for sidewalk renewal as well as new sidewalks. So that I think reflects the seriousness with which we'd like to take this. That's a big constituent ask, I think, is walkability in town. One meeting I had a few weeks ago that was arranged for me was with the head of transportation for the city of Norwalk. And they have just had a very aggressive effort at putting sidewalks in Norwalk, something like 12 miles worth of sidewalks. And he talked us through the process and some of the issues that they faced. But he specifically highlighted what the citizen response to that was once they put in those sidewalks. They love it. They really have taken to that, and once you get sorted out, the things like easements and impacts on properties, that type of thing, but they've had a great deal of success and have offered to help us as we navigate our own challenges in thinking about sidewalks. So that's the reason for that. Lots of air conditioning replacement. One thing I have to say I'm really impressed with is Sharon. She's the new head of facilities for the police department. She gave a presentation to the Board of Selectmen the other day that shows she is really on top of that facility. I think there's more to come in terms of repair work that we need, but she is right on top of that, and I think has given us a lot to think about, and it's greatly comforting to have someone for competence in charge of all that. It was a terrific discussion. One of them is replacing the police rooftop AC. She's got a number of other things for us to consider. I did in that meeting, if you've seen a recording, ask her to go in and contemplate what to do about that building. And that is, she takes a long view about everything that absolutely needs to be done to fix it. That, to be quite honest, we should consider that cost and benchmark that against the cost of just taking that building down and starting over. It was a mistake to build the building the way we did, which was pieces of the old building and trying to build around it. And it's unfortunate that we've ended up where we are. But one thing is we're not going to come with a recommendation that's not very thoroughly vetted with multiple boards and accompanied by good analysis to help us make that decision. So the bottom line on that is we need to make a smarter decision on that building, and she's going to help us do that. Town Hall rooftop AC, I and my friends over there, we live in that building, and I can tell you that is also very much necessary. That we are in the process of renovating the fire marshal office. That's in part to make space for the persons that we're looking to hire into the assistant roles. And there's a variety of other things from small capital, and the lists of which you guys have seen in prior budget requests. For bonding this year, we've got fire engines and harbor dredging. So for the fire engines, 2 are listed there. I've asked the Fire Commission as well as all the departments to come in. I would like to take a very fresh look at our fire equipment replacement strategy. We haven't done that in a number of years. It's both the equipment that we have as it's spread out among the 3 departments. It's how you think about when those pieces of equipment need to be retired. It's what happens to them once they are retired. How do we recruit resources from that? And just take another smart look at that. You've probably read in the press that because of consolidation in that industry, delivery times for new fire vehicles are greatly extended, upwards of 4 years now, if you can believe. Place an order 4 years before you actually get delivery. So I want to take a completely fresh look at that and make sure that we're approaching that in the best way. The harbor dredging that you see there is a reasonable estimate. That's something we do not have a firm figure for, but we'd like to throw that up for bonding at some point once we do. So what we're talking about is the Darien Harbor dredging. This is not the boat club. This is further out from the boat club towards the Northern Yacht Club. And that has been teed up for a while. We have, a couple of things have happened. One is we did get a sediment report from the environmentalists, and that sediment is green, and which means that we would be able to take that, and that can be dumped into Long Island Sound. It does not have to be shipped and incinerated. So that's going to reduce the scope and cost of this particular dredging exercise. The sediment, by comparison, around the boat club was contaminated, and we're having to ship that to New Jersey for treatment. We are awaiting Army Corps of Engineers, which I believe is the final approval that we need. But once we have that, that would go out to bid, and that would be something that we would bond. So summarizing, up 5.5% versus for the Board of Selectmen versus just over 4.8% last year. We've made no assumptions for potential health savings, and I think I could speak for Jen. We do expect something. We're not quite sure what form that's going to take, but we will definitely have that. The Post 53 grant is a big step, but one that is justified in our view, and I invite you to make your own conclusion when they come to speak to you. Debt service, that's a preliminary figure. You all will get the final figure once you go through your April bonding exercise. And then, of course, for investment income, it's because of lower rates, and you all should also add to that estimates for bond proceeds earnings in the coming year. And as my note says, we believe this is a reasonable budget that is adequate for meeting town needs. It takes into account what we think citizens need to see in town government. And three I'll issue. One is to Josh, all his technical expertise for spreadsheets, and the tools that we use to look at budgets are much better because you're here, and I really appreciate that. Jennifer is a star in countless ways, not the least of which is the budget process that she oversaw. And I'll steal her words, which is how much of these thanks go to our department heads who just did an extraordinary job. You know, we would sit in discussion after discussion to look at these sheets and say, I just don't know what to cut. There's no silliness, there's no extra spending, there's no people that we don't need to hire, we're not paying for anything we don't need to pay for. There's a couple things that we've added on, which you guys should spotlight, but I think you can have some confidence that this budget is pretty tight. We'd like to see 3.5%, 4% budgets. Right now it's 5.5%, but if we could have found a way to cut that without cutting the services we think residents are looking for, I assure you we would have done it. So that's it. Any questions?
I have a quick question on your
Please.
paving,
Yep.
on your sidewalk. Is that, I know you have a sidewalk committee, is that number that you have in there sort of a placeholder, or have you identified a certain number of feet that you're gonna?
That's a good question.
Right.
We keep in mind that it's not just what that committee would come up with. The Director of Public Works actually has quite a few candidates that are identified actually already for new sidewalks and for renewal and restoration. And so even if the sidewalk committee were not to come up with anything, we would be able to redirect those funds to identify projects. So I would say that we'll absolutely spend
That's
that
a
money.
pretty good number then.
And depending on how aggressive they are, we could come back for a bit more. So let's see.
Thank you.
How was the committee selected, and is the local traffic authority included in that?
How was what?
The committee.
The committee.
How was
No, the local traffic authority is not included in that. We have taken applications for positions. You have to have partisan representation on a committee like that, so both the RTC and DTC have been interviewing candidates, and as soon as I get the list from the RTC, we're going to do interviews. We have probably 15 or 16 candidates for a 7-member committee for the sidewalks, and some number less than that for the conservation committee. But we've taken, all kinds of people have signed up for that. We'll have a good diverse group of people.
But all citizens, no professionals?
Well, no, so Ed Gentile's going to be adjunct to the committee. We've actually hired a sidewalk consultant who's going to work with them and help them prioritize locations, because keep in mind what you need here is you need a group of citizens to service locations in town where people would like to have sidewalks, and to do a preliminary assessment and sort of ranking, if you will, of those locations. Once that work is finished, that's when the professionals like Ed will come in and help the Board of Selectmen sort through all the recommendations that we've made or that have been made, and then make sure the ones that we invest in are the ones that meet certain professionally determined feasibility requirements. So there's a time for professionals to come in and do that, but given the interest in sidewalks, just like we did with the Pedestrian Infrastructure Advisory Committee 10 years ago, we want to get public input, and the best way to do that is not just putting professionals on the committee.
So they'll be involved at a later date?
Well, no, the sidewalk consultant is going to be involved from day one. I'm going to be ex officio to the committee, and so is Ed Gentile. So,
But the local traffic authority?
Well, the local traffic authority is going to be consulted as part of this. So one area where they're going to play a role is in the advisory committee work 10 years ago, they had, 100 crosswalks proposed all over town. And part of the problem with that was that when they put the proposals for those in, they didn't take into account the local traffic authority input. And I said, as a criteria for this committee, you can put in as many crosswalks or recommend as many as you want, but the local traffic authority has to sign off on every one of them, because there's certain professional standards that you have to meet to do that. So we're going to use them judiciously. I don't want to tie up their time sorting through all of this, but just sort of rifle shots where I really need their judgment, and crosswalks is an example of that.
In terms of sidewalks, I know we're not using OpenGov this year. Thank you. But what's been like the 5-year average in terms of what we spent on sidewalks?
$500,000, something like that. Yeah. It varies depending on, interestingly, one of the constraints is the availability of the companies who do this kind of work. That's work that's contracted out, and sometimes you don't actually have capacity to do that. So that is interestingly a constraining factor in all that.
And how does that all relate to this ADA report? I mean, you have sort of the sidewalk projects, you've got an ADA.
So the ADA report pertains to facilities. So if you go and look at that, it'll take a look at, for example, this building,
Yep.
our parks, facilities, that type of thing. And so what they came in and they said was, we're going to make recommendations to get your buildings into ADA compliance. For sidewalks, there are certain ADA standards with which those have to be built. And in some cases, the topography makes it infeasible to build it to precisely those standards, so it's mainly pitch and width. So for example, when we redid the sidewalks on Nearwater, it was either make it ADA compliant or cut down a gorgeous 85-year-old tree. Not all the locations are ADA compliant. We didn't cut down the trees. Some of them were diseased and we had to, but there are some spots that are just not ADA compliant, and well, they just aren't.
Okay.
And so we'll use good judgment on all that.
Okay.
But the ADA report really was not about sidewalks, it was about buildings.
Well, then can you speak just briefly to the ADA, they're calling it circulation study at Cherry Lawn?
So that's something different. So the history of that was that we had proposed a traffic study for Cherry Lawn. And part of that was to help us come up with a better way to manage not just vehicular but pedestrian traffic there. So that was turned down. I think this board cut it, or maybe I can't remember, somebody cut it. And so we didn't do that, but then the ADA study came out. The ADA study actually pointed to a number of deficiencies at Cherry Lawn. So what they're coming up with is now this study, which is going to incorporate a lot of what we were doing before, but specifically layer in ADA compliance on top of that. So that's the reason that study is in their budget. That's what we're trying to do there. So in other words, you're going to get both the circulation study and you're going to get where investments need to be made to shore up the ADA deficiencies that were identified by that consultant.
Are we getting ideas or are we getting a plan? Or like, kind of like.
Well, a plan is going to come out of that. In terms of exactly what it's going to cover, it's going to look to remediating the identified ADA deficiencies, but it's also going to take a look at recommendations for how you could improve traffic flow at Cherry Lawn, which is problematic.
Right, similar to what we just approved on Great Island. You came back with a consultant who's putting together the plan, as opposed. So if this will be
professionally this will be a professionally developed plan that elected and appointed officials can react to.
Okay.
So can you speak to the $171,000 on your line item for ADA, and is that just this year? Or, what kind of Pandora's box are we opening with that?
So ADA, when I talked to the consultant, this was last year, and I asked him, so based on what you're seeing in this plan, what do you think all the ADA compliance in town is going to cost if we were to do every single thing in this plan? And he says it could be $5 to $6 million. You'll also recall from his recommendation that he said this can be done over a 12-year period. One of the reasons that we got this ADA plan is, or this report, one is it's the right thing to do. This is the law, and there's lots of people in town who have mobility challenges, and we should do our best to make sure we've met those challenges. But the other reason is that when you have a plan like this in place and you're working to really correct the findings in that plan, it's a prophylactic against lawsuits and other things. They can't come after you and say, well, you haven't complied with this, when yes, we are deficient, but we have a plan in place and we're working through it. And we have 12 years to sort through all that. So the initial budgeting that you see for this is our first steps in trying to correct the deficiencies that were identified in that plan.
That was $5 to $6 million for buildings only, not for sidewalks and.
Well, sidewalks are. We're not going to be correcting ADA with sidewalks. We're rebuilding sidewalks and do all that. When we do that, to the extent possible, we're not impeded by nature, we will make those sidewalks ADA compliant. But there's not a plan to say, oh, wait a minute, this sidewalk was not ADA compliant. No, we're not doing that. We'll fix the sidewalks as they need fixing, and we'll correct that at that time. But there's not an ADA effort on sidewalks.
And John, just on that generally, like when we use the word like compliant, is it the $5 to $6 million? Were these recommendations that the consultant made, or are these things that you are in violation and these need to be fixed?
So this is all on a continuum, like most things in life. It's very, very rare that we show up and there's a clear binary, yes, no, right? It's on a continuum. And so, for example, at Weed Beach, when you go through that report, you'll find that there are a few places where, say, there's a railing, or there's a pitch to a particular ramp, or there's proximity to the edge of a water fountain that's off by half an inch, literally small measurements like that. And is it technically a violation? Yes. Is that at the top of the list for things we're going to remediate and fix? No. So over time, what we're going to need to do with a lot of this, and I'm glad we have 12 years to sort through it, is apply that type of judgment. There's going to be some things that are simply impractical to change for the amount of money that you'd have to spend to fix that quarter-inch deviation. But to the extent that we redo anything, or it's clear that the investment required to fix it is not unreasonable, and there's lots of standards in the law in terms of what is deemed a reasonable repair or replacement for something to meet those standards. And like I said, there's a continuum of that. We remain in touch with the team that did all of this, and they're available to help us sort through all that to make sure we get that balance just right.
Okay. John, maybe back on the numbers, the 5.5%. I think if you flip back a few pages, did that excluded the library grant, is that correct?
Correct. As you can see on
Yeah.
this page.
So if you took the 360,000-ish that was being proposed to the post 53 sort of out of the Selectmen budget, right, on an apples to apples, that would lower that to like 4.5, right? That's basically 100 basis points
Yeah,
ish.
I'm not that good at math at this hour, but yes, something like that.
It's like 360 on 38.
Yeah, the
So,
one I did do is
yeah.
that if the treasurer's investment income budget was 3,850 instead of
Yeah.
2.4 million, that 11.5% at the bottom would be 300 basis points less.
But if we take that out, like sort of the apples to apples year over year increase is really 4.5%.
Yeah, I didn't put this, I mean, I've done these slides in the past and did it when I was in your role that tried to take these increases to say, all right, there's what I would call the core increases. And so this is salaries of people on a payroll, or this is electricity in a building that we are running right now. To take all of that stuff and say, this increase comes from that. And then here's the other increase that says, these are things we've added that we didn't have last year. So you could see if we just kept doing what we were doing last year, the number would be that. And I think it's, the 4 to 4.5% range. By the time you were to take out not just that, but the fire marshal hire and the 2 or 3 other things, the extra 500 for sidewalks. So I took all that out. Yeah, I'd get to something that felt a lot closer to the Board of Education figure. Not quite that low, I think, but close. But I think those things that we've added in there make sense for a lot of reasons. And so if you decide to cut the budget, one of the things you got to decide is do we go after these core things or do you go after the add-ons? And the add-ons, it's a pretty discrete list, and you just got to decide as a town, do we want to do those things or not? We think we do, but ultimately that's your call to make.
And then, just back to understanding the numbers on the debt service, that $2.6 million increase,
Yep.
Does that assume we amortize principal in the new bond deals in fiscal 27?
What was that? Sorry.
Does that does the $2.6 million increase in debt service from last year to this year, does that assume that we
the 3.7
pay principal?
Yeah, the 3.7 is all the new issuances coming up.
It's deferred.
Okay. Which has been your standard all along. We didn't change the standard for this estimate.
But ultimately, it increases the debt service in the subsequent years. And that's something that I hope the board looks at.
Yeah, I think, like, back to that 2.6 million increase, I think that includes principal in 27 on the new
That,
bond issue.
Josh or Jen, do you guys recall?
We put that together back in January, so it was before you started discussing updating sizing, so it was kind of worst case scenario or biggest case scenario on sizing, and I think we assumed deferral, but I know you've had conversations since then, so that number is not gonna tie anywhere near the pro formas that you have
Yeah,
for
just
today.
from initial pro formas when we were doing a larger band and then smaller bond band. So that'll get shifted around, of course.
Yeah, just like point, like 2A has that, probably has that more in the 1.7, has $1 million less increase. And then the other thing on healthcare, the Board of Ed said they're implementing at least a partial, with stopgap insurance, self-insurance fund. Is that something that we'd also look at or consider for the town side?
I'm going to take we're going to take a town-focused look at that. If self-insurance and stop-loss were the obvious path to go, everybody would do it, but they don't. And the reason is that it doesn't work in all cases. And so what we're going to do is take a completely separate soup-to-nuts look at our health insurance for the town. We're working with the town broker right now on that, and we'll see what they recommend. But it's going to be fact-based, and we'll go through what we're seeing in the marketplace for competing insurers. We'll take a look at all the economics of a self-insurance stop-loss program compared to what the Board of Ed has done, and we'll come up with what we think is the best answer for the town. I don't have a prescription on that just yet. We're not finished.
Yeah, because I think the Board of Ed proposal, while I think that does decrease costs relative to the way that they did it last year.
For now.
I, for one, would like to understand, like, what is the sort of 1 or 2 standard deviation move in terms of what that could cost a town if our experiences are higher or lower than expected?
Yeah, we'll take a look at that.
Because, savings are good, but if they come with volatility.
I would probe that very carefully in your
Yes.
deliberations with them.
Do other towns in Fairfield County self-insure on the town side?
I don't know that.
I wonder if that's like a.
New Canaan
New
does.
Canaan does, yeah.
Oh, really?
I mean, it's supposed to smooth out volatility, that's the main reason, is because you build up the
Because you have
reserve
a
and then
fund.
you can keep your budget transfer in a little flatter as you utilize some of the reserve that is built up, or build back some of that fund in years that you kind
Are we comparable in the number of employees who would participate?
of, yeah.
Aren't we smaller?
It's pretty similar, maybe a little bit smaller.
Okay. I just think that would probably be a factor as the size of the population.
They did see good savings and good experience with it, but
The bigger the better, right? If you could pool
yeah.
it.
But there's volatility. So if the first year we contribute 18 million and they need 19 million, that's $1 million shortfall.
Yeah,
Yes.
There's no surplus from prior years that have,
Not on year one, no.
not on your one.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna start somewhere.
so it's a large step.
No, and if you have a surplus, I mean, it's no different than fund balance. Fund balance is nice to have, but ultimately, it is taxpayer money that's just sitting there. Right, it's earning money, but it's been taken from the taxpayers and it's sitting there. And this would be something we would have to fund over the long term if we had that. And I don't think that should be, we would attribute a zero cost to that.
Yeah, and I think they pointed out that that would be a lapsing fund, so it would,
It's a non-lapsing.
sorry, non-lapsing fund, so that would not be available back into the general fund.
Well, but that's the whole point. You're
Yeah.
building up a reserve over time, which by definition has to be non-lapsing.
Can you expand on the all other that adds up to 1.9 million on the capital page?
Go back.
That.
That one.
So that includes, for example, all of the fire department small capital accounts. This could be police department vehicles that figure into that has,
Hose.
I don't know, if you look at any of the capital requests we've had in prior years, there's a whole long list of small things that go into that. That
All
most
less than
departments have.
75 is the,
I think that's actually right.
okay.
No, not necessarily.
Police vehicles.
So police vehicles, in the aggregate, I think they're replacing 3 or 4. It's about $250,000 for that program.
But they're less than 75 each. Which is
Each,
why-
yeah. The
It's a
reason
little
that,
misleading in that regard, but yeah.
yeah, so the $75,000 for renovate fire marshal, that one I had pulled out in my presentation just because it was tied to the new position and part of that new initiative. In the all other, there's $150,000 for rooftop HVAC at DFD. There's other PD building and facility items ranging $50,000-ish. So most of them are probably under $75,000, but I wouldn't say they all are.
Mhm.
But it's a lot of radio replacements.
Yeah.
It was like a hose.
So.
Yeah, there's actually hose replacements.
No, I remember seeing that too. But,
Yeah.
And then if the conversation is ongoing about the police department, and it sounds like maybe there's $500,000 in capital there. Is any of that deferrable if we decided to do something different, or is that a must-do?
So we
no
had
matter what?
that was a great question that came up in that discussion. What we decided to do was to leave it in the budget as if we're not going to do anything dramatic with the building. And we talked to Sharon, and actually I kind of want to follow up
Yeah,
on
we
that to
should
see where
touch.
that is, to see where they are in trying to answer that question, which is to add up all the numbers to fix everything, and then to add it up what it would take to just scrape it and start over. If it looks like that is a viable option, we would go through and purge all this stuff here and just say we're going to not spend that money and focus on replacing the building. But we'll get to a decision about that to recommend and discuss before we spend that money. So in other words, we're not going to waste money on stuff that we would just tear out in any case.
Could I just make a request to get examples, like a list of examples of what we're spending on, like what projects are being prioritized with the ADA money?
You, in your 6-year capital, which you have access to on the intranet, there's a tab for each department, and then the final tab is ADA.
Okay.
It's over 6 years, it's 4.7 million.
And what that does not include is anything that would fall under the DPW umbrella, because they haven't yet been able to work through their facilities reports and put it into the 6-year.
Okay. More.
Mr. Baumgartner, nice to see you. Mr. Zakrowski. Anything else? Okay, we are available as much as you need to go through anything down to the last detail, so we appreciate it. So
Just a
listen.
quick question, Josh, on the 6-year capital plan, on the summary page, you've got the ADA line. Is it possible, I don't see the ADA lines in each of the small, like the breakout of the police and the.
No, because it's all consolidated on one ADA tab, but then on
Yeah.
that tab, you'll see
Okay.
police, park and rec.
We'll do it that way, that's what
Yep,
we're doing it.
just so
Okay.
that we could keep them all together and track what we're doing on ADA.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Did we? Well, I can ask later.
We're just getting
Okay. So the next, I put a placeholder on the next item here, which was discuss our budget review schedule. It's included in the agenda here, so just in terms of schedule tonight. John, thank you. Jen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just to make everybody aware, we have a meeting next Tuesday, right, where you can see Public Works, Sewer Fund, Parking Fund, Great Island Management Fund. We have a number of budget items that we're going to look at, but we're also going to have some closeouts for the,
RFCNRE,
yep,
as well as a couple authorizations, one for reducing Great Island, as well as, I believe the sewer I&I authorization might be on there as well, possibly.
and those things will all be done, particularly the Great Island one, before we vote on, you know, the charge, if you will, to go forward with the bond offering. So that's next Tuesday, and then, you know, the following, each Tuesday thereafter, as well as kind of two in the first week of April, on Tuesday and Thursday.
On that page, some of these have asterisks next to them. What does that mean?
That means that there'll be like a representative from the department, or Post 53 will be here at the library, and Ed
Okay.
or so on.
So will we hear from Post 53?
You will on March 24th.
Yep.
They'll be here.
That, I watched that meeting, that was a good presentation.
Great.
Yeah.
And a couple, I know there's a couple sub-meetings. Melinda and I are meeting with the Post 53 team on the Monday, the 16th, I think. And then Rob, you and I have a meeting next Friday, I think.
This Friday.
This Friday,
On the
sorry,
CM.
coming up with some friends from the RTM with the police department. Dan, you had it?
Never mind. I'm good.
So we'll see how intense next Tuesday's, how busy the agenda for next Tuesday gets. And if we need to sort of push something, we'll determine, you know, which one that we need to.
It's possible RFCNRE closeouts can be pushed slightly, but we can see how we are on time.
Got it. Okay. Actually, I skipped over item 2. Sorry about that, Mark. So the last item is going to be to discuss our upcoming bond issue. I even cleared our room out even more. How about that? That's impressive.
Well, you were hiding back there. I didn't see you.
Yeah.
This side didn't see you.
I know.
This is strategy.
Nice.
So, Josh sent around last week pro formas on like 6 different options, or three different options with a sub-option on each for the bonding. And then Josh, you guys each should have in front of you a side-by-side that he put together for some of the sub-options and kind of comparing 2 and 3, so.
So
No.
So you'll also have on the kind of first page after the agenda, a breakdown of the projects of the issue with, as we had discussed last time, most of the projects living in the recommended for bonding, as well as the HHR and Gorham's Dam still in the recommended notes. I point out that we've kind of reduced the initial figures for HHR to what you see on page 2, which is the number we had discussed, which takes into account kind of the budgeted savings, which hopefully still exists, as well as the grants that we'll see coming in. But within these pro formas exists kind of where we had envisioned them at first, which I think was about 5 million-ish each, and now they're closer to an average of 2 million or so. So that's one difference between the pro formas.
Yeah. And maybe just to double down on the amounts related to HHR, right? That we would bond, sorry, that we would put a ban on. I think Rob and I and Chris, at some of your suggestion, are going to talk about whether or not the approximately $1 million of paving for H&R and even some of the gymnasium floor, if that could be included in that bonding and therefore come out of the taxing and go to that bonding project.
Right, we can always adjust these numbers leading up to next Tuesday when you vote on it to kind of take into account if that, I think it was 1.1 million per school savings isn't going to be.
Are you referring to my email earlier about
the pavement for the HH&R as well as
as far as the school budget is concerned?
Yes, taking them.
The school capital.
Yes.
So will we have voted on that budget in time? I didn't think we'd be able to include it because of the timing.
So the discussion is, reached out to Chris, and Rob and I are going to talk with him about whether or not it's about $1 million between HH&R that's in the school's capital budget.
For paving and. Right.
So we could potentially take that out of the school's capital budget for fiscal '27 and put it into the HHR and use I think there's like $6 million or so surplus.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then also there's like gymnasium, and so that would take therefore we don't need to fund it with tax dollars, and we could maybe fund it with a bonding appropriation that was made.
And in theory,
a couple
Dan, the
years ago.
HHR will meet, I think, in two weeks, right? So if they approve it, then it'll be in time for our final findings.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we are going to vote on the sizing next week for what the bonds.
You and I should talk to Chris ASAP.
Bollards are put there too, right? Like any of those, like
bollards
that would.
Well, there's two different things. There's
bollards.
yes.
They're part of the permanent structure.
I think there's two different. Let's just divide this issue and then kind of move on. There's, do we fund those items, for instance, the paving with tax dollars or with a bonding appropriation? If we've made the decision to do it with a bonding appropriation, then our fork in the road is, do we fund it with a ban that would roll in a year, or do we fund it with long-term 20-year bonds, right? And if we did it with the ban, then we could always refinance it. But I think let's first get to the bottom of whether or not we could we could move it from taxpayer dollars in this budget to the bond authorization. Right?
But with the bond authorization, we can set a maximum, but we can also issue below that, correct?
Yes.
So if we set a bond authorization next week that includes it, and for some reason we don't include it, we could.
So I don't think it's technically a bond authorization. It's like
We already have a bond authorization.
It's an authorization
right?
to sell bonds.
Yes,
So
yes,
bonds and/or notes.
Yeah.
yes, but it can be up to.
I don't know if, it may be able to be worded that we can sell up to, but I'm not, I'd have to check on that.
It's just the amounts are subject to change.
Yeah, I thought it's always up to,
Yeah.
because we can always issue, because we
Within the
typically target
bond
proceeds,
authorization,
right?
it is always up
Yeah.
to, but I'm not sure if it's within the bonds, the authorization to sell bonds, if it's typically up to. Normally, it's the exact project amount that
I think
gets
we sell
authorized.
bonds, and we always talk about, because generally speaking, we get premium proceeds. So we've always said, when we're on like the last phase of a project, we always say raise proceeds equal not more than this.
Yeah, that has happened, I think, with Oxbridge most
Yeah.
recently, that was kind of worded in a different way. And we can look into that leading up to next week.
But if ever in agreement, we'll work with HHR to see if when we can move it from fiscal '27
Yeah.
capital appropriation to HHR bond authorization, and then we can kind of determine whether or not where we
Yes.
issue
Yeah,
it.
it just needs to fall under the scope of those
Yeah.
authors, like those projects.
Yes,
And I
that
think-
existing authorization.
Yeah, I'm sure Blacktop was included. Because it's being
Everything
done.
else was right.
Okay, sorry about that. Just wanted to.
Jim, can I ask a quick question? Have we, I don't recall us bonding paving parking lots in the past.
Not typically.
Yeah, typically, like with roads, we pay for it. With parking lots that I recall, typically under the $1 million, and we haven't been bonding them. So, I mean, it's, again, your decision to do that, but it's a change in policy.
There is paving being done. When we built Oxbridge, there was pavement put down. And there is other paving being done in connection with HHR.
And, no, I know, so, and that's paying part of the bonding, but it was the parking lots that I was concerned. I had already mentioned the bullets and the gym floors to why we couldn't move it in about a month ago. So that I'm fully supportive of. It's just, are we changing policy if we're doing parking lots now as well?
Well, we're like bonding desks and chairs as
Yeah, I
well.
understand.
So like it's, when it's part of a larger sort of all-encompassing project, we've typically like did everything that's inside the project. But we'll take a look at it.
So also in the packets that you have in front of you is kind of a comparison looking at the combined debt service between the A and B within scenarios 2, so scenario 2A versus 2B for their combined debt service over the life of the 30-year bonds, as well as 3A, 3B, and then a kind of a 2A versus 3A, so you can kind of get a comparison between those. I think we were kind of off of the scenario 1 where we were thinking of doing it for like an initial large ban and then bonding just for the 30 years. So that's not really taken into account here.
So does everybody like fully understand the difference between 1, 2, and 3?
High-level overview would be
Why
really
don't you-
helpful.
yeah, why don't you do
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, so
It's not in-
for 1, right, scenario 1 was basically, if you turn to the 3rd page of scenario 1,
What page are we talking about?
so just look at,
Okay.
like,
The name of the file
How about the
is,
assumptions?
Scenario
Yeah, assumptions.
1A.
no, go to the 3rd page, that's right. The 3rd page of the PDF, but the one labeled as page 2, which says future debt issuance.
Yeah.
In scenario 1, what we're basically saying is let's issue bans, which are notes, in the amount of 35 million, sort of short 1-year debt, and let's do bonds in the amount of 51.9 million, longer term debt, a combination of like 20-year and 30-year, right? And what that did was, rather than issuing bans for just Gorms Pond, which we assume we're going to hopefully get a
Reimbursement.
I'm sorry, your numbers and my numbers aren't the same.
Exactly.
I'm on the 3rd page.
Yeah, you're on
That uses
3A.
Yeah,
You
But
need
that's
a
the
1A.
so
you're
scenario
talking about.
1
There's
is-
another file
Yeah.
that says 1A.
So guys,
okay, but that's like
okay, hold on.
page,
In the agenda, right, when you look at the attachments to the agenda, they go like 3, 2, 1. In the email that Josh sent around last week, he had attachments 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, 2. So just scroll down to what you see as, until you get to 1A.
That's what I'm trying to do.
It's probably the very end.
Like 4 or 5 more pages. So,
All right, page 36.
Thank you.
Yep.
okay, so like that's PDF 36, right, on our
38.
38. So if you look on that, you'll see there was 35 of notes, kind of short-term debt, and 51 of long-term debt. The 35 of short-term debt was not just like the, was not just the schools, like the $6 million from the schools, or the couple $1 million from Gorham's Pond, which we expect to get a grant back from. It included a bunch of other kind of smaller projects in there.
And Pear Tree.
And Pear Tree, right? That was 1. If you look at 2 and 3,
And we discussed, a month ago, we discussed maybe shrinking the band and
Yes.
increasing the size of the bond. So
Yeah.
we're moving away from ones.
yeah.
So,
So 2 and 3
Right.
basically take and shrink the band, the 1-year debt, down to only Gorham's Pond.
Yeah, so I'd point out on scenario 1, the kind of main focus was also, we were bonding for a 30-year debt and
Right.
only what would fall under 30-year, and then banning for the rest, basically, so that we wouldn't have to do kind of a blended or lot A, lot B. And then in option B, or scenario 2,
Sorry.
Slide 60.
I picked these scenario numbers, I'm sorry.
in scenario 2, was it that we're, have a lot A, lot B.
Correct.
That we're bonding for, that includes 30-year and 20-year, as well as banning for HHR and Gorham's Dam. Kind of waiting on when we'll get grant reimbursement from FEMA for Gorham's Dam, when we'll see the state reimbursement for HHR, and taking into account what that under budget spend might be.
Yeah.
Option number 3, is a blended mix of 20 and 30-year debt into one lot. And that's all we would be bonding for, and then we would still be banning for HHR and Gorham's Dam. The difference between 2 and 3 are really that we have a single larger issue in that blended rate, but we're forced into doing a low to high debt structure as opposed to level debt. And there's an A and B for each of these that represents no deferred principal versus 2-year deferred principal, which is option A, I think is.
A is the deferral.
Yeah.
And B is start paying principal next year.
Yep. So 1 is bigger band, smaller bonds. 2 is we're minimizing the bands and higher amount of bonds.
With
right?
level debt service.
Yep. With level debt service. Well, then that's what 1 versus 2 and 3 is. And then when you look down at 2 and 3, right? 2 and 3 is 2 is level debt service. 3 is what we call sort of, it's $100 of principal in the first 9 years, and then $150 of principal using like the low-high approach.
Sure.
And then further, if we want to do level debt service in 2, what we said is you kind of have to have 2 sub-tranches, right? Which are maybe more form than substance, right? But in scenario 3, when you're doing the low-high, you could just do one tranche. So that's why on some of these, like on scenario 2, you see Mark labeled them as, at least in 2B, Mark labeled them as kind of tranche 1 and tranche A and tranche.
Lot A, lot B.
Yeah, lot A, lot B. So in terms of narrowing this down, does it make sense that we first, let's discuss if we're all where we were last meeting in terms of pointing towards minimizing the ban to only Gorham's Pond, which we might get reimbursed by the state, and the HHR where
You're expecting reimbursement.
expecting reimbursements, but just don't have it yet.
Makes sense.
And then maximizing the amount of long-term debt we issue, whether it's 20 or 30 years. Are people generally still in agreement with?
Yeah, I am.
So it sounds like we would set aside scenario 1A and 1B.
yes.
When's our issue date?
Is it,
I brought it.
but the sale is April 23rd.
No, the closing, so
Closing's April
we
23rd.
pulled the sale up to the April 2nd,
Right.
so that we can help with your final
Yeah, the
budget.
budget vote is on the, is it 3rd or 4th?
Oh, no, this is the next week.
Oh, yes, it is the next week.
So we were gonna do it like the day before, like we did last year.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, the budget
it was
vote
just a
is
little,
on, is
little
on the.
tougher for you guys to do.
The budget vote is on the 7th, and so the prior week is the sale.
Yeah, so the idea was to have a final number for the budget. And
And
Josh won't have to scramble.
We'd have time to put it in the budget.
I mean, my only recommendation, particularly with what's going on and what we're seeing moving around in the markets and so forth, is like, it'd be great to have it all done and wrapped up by the time we vote, but let's just not push ourselves into a bad market, because if we have to go the week after we pass the budget, then we can always pass it to our friends in the RTM to kind of move it up or down.
The only thing is, you have notes coming due April 23rd.
I was just gonna say,
So you can't, if we had no notes, then we can
Yeah.
postpone it and do things, but you need to come up with $49 million by April 23rd.
so Mike,
And
would we have the liquidity to redeem, to pay off that note?
No.
No, we would not.
But what's the minimum amount of time we need between selling a ban or bond and closing on it?
I don't want to speak for bond counsel, because that's when they do all the heavy lifting, but, I mean, comfortable is 2 weeks, that's kind of the standard.
That puts us on
We,
the
right now,
line.
we have 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Can they get it done quicker? Sure.
That puts
But
us
I don't
on
want
the
to
ninth-
make,
We're
the
selling
9th of
white
April
paint to
then?
people who need white paint.
Selling on the
It's
9th, the
GO,
fund on the
so-
23rd, to be in a position to,
yeah, that would be fine. So if, whatever the event is that's going on, it escalates even further, and it's, the 2nd, and doesn't look good, and the 10-year shot up like it did this morning, then, maybe we postpone it till Tuesday, and hopefully things settle down, the following week.
I think we should get ready, get set, and be aiming to do it as soon as possible, but if we need to wait a day or two, because like on Monday where the markets were largely closed.
Yeah, yeah. Like today, the 10-year shot up over, over 410, right? It settled down back to 405, but initially in the morning when we're selling all this stuff, it was a little hectic in the market. I don't know if 5 basis points is a reason to postpone, but, you certainly have that flexibility.
Okay.
Because it could get worse, right?
Okay. So if we're in the minimize bans, maximize bonds, and then I think the next question is like the deferral of interest, deferral of principal until the third year. That's the difference between basically the scenario A and B.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need to be pay it the first year or pay it the third year. It could be start the first year, start the second year, or start the third year. All of the A scenarios, if you will, assume that we start in the third year.
Yeah. Maximize deferral.
Yeah.
Is there a side-by-side of how much interest is paid in the two different structures?
Yeah, so if you are, the ones that Josh sent around today, or handed out today?
These ones?
These,
Yeah.
So I took the 13 pager and kind of brought it down to 2. So if you want to compare, say, scenario 2A versus 2B.
Yeah.
So your this is total principal and interest, and this is existing plus all the new stuff. So at the end of 30 years, so scenario 2 would be 403 million, and scenario 2B is 401. So over the course of 30 years, you're paying $2 more million of interest. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Level debt.
That's all level debt, yeah.
Level debt.
But you're paying that over time, right? You're paying that extra 2 million over 20-something years. You're gaining 2A versus 2B is you have savings, or your debt impact, budgetary impact is less in years 1 and 2.
And Mark, maybe just to set the scenario between A and B in level 2, what is like I didn't see it here, what's like the average life of A, where we do level debt service, with a 2-year deferral?
It's over 15 years.
But the difference between A and B, like, is there?
I don't have that with me, quite honestly. But it's like,
It's got to be longer, right, because we're deferring for 2 years?
well, they're both deferring for 2 years, but one, oh no, 2 years. So it'll be like 16 years, I believe, for the maximal deferral, and then it's probably closer to 14 years for the not deferring it.
Okay.
So to be clear, 2A is level debt, deferred principal.
Correct.
Oh,
Okay,
it's
'cause
here.
Yep.
Yeah,
For 2
deferred.
years.
That's what I was saying.
Scenario B
Yep.
is
2B.
level principal.
No, level.
Level debt still.
Level debt still, no
No
deferred.
deferred.
No deferred.
Correct. The only difference is the deferral.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's a couple year difference in that average life.
So what you see here, if you look in the right-hand column, the 1.3 million and the $1.5 million difference, it's virtually all of that is due to the fact that in one scenario you're paying principal, in the other you're not. And then there's a very small component of it is because your principal is slightly backloaded and the curve is upward sloping. There's like slight differences,
Right.
like de minimis differences in the overall like blended coupon.
Right. Right.
If we're talking about, we're really looking at scenario 3, right? Didn't we just decide that?
I think we're looking at 2. So 2 is level debt service.
I know, but I thought when we were earlier talking, you were like, we eliminated 1 and 2, we were talking about 3.
We eliminated 1.
Oh, eliminated. I thought it was 1 and 2. Okay.
Sure, so I don't know if you want to, so are we understanding 2?
Yep.
So 2A is what we've been doing over the last several issuances. So it's maximizing the deferral on the principal and doing level principal and interest debt service. And we've done that for a multitude of reasons, right? There's intergenerational equity, all the, why does it, meaning why do the taxpayers today pay for everything versus, Great Island should be here for 30 years at least. Let people who come in and out will also be paying for that, the use of that net asset. That's kind of, I believe, the understanding on why we went in that direction with these things. And typically what we've been doing is, you got to kind of match the useful life with the asset. So I think there's been a determination that, land obviously is longer, and then other thing, the schools and things like that, we've been going 20 years for that. So that's kind of why we have to do a lot A, lot B. All it means is we'll have another sealed bid, and it'll be fine, it'll get sold. It's, the official statement will be a little bit more complex, but the prospectus, but it really means nothing, from this perspective. And that's what you've done in the past. So I think Oxbridge, that, when we did the school, I think that was 20 years as well. 20-year level principal and interest. So just to kind of frame it, we're not doing anything different or special. Well, what I was charged with is just kind of, what is the added cost for deferring, right? What are we actually paying? And it's, it's $2 million, roughly 1.9 over the course of 30 years.
So, but, and that doesn't sound like a lot over the course of 30 years, but the present value of that today is actually, depending on what you discount it at. If you discount it at the assumed rate of issuance of 3.9%.
Yeah, like 3%, yeah, so it's gonna be.
If you just took 2 million forward, it's close to $700,000.
Right, it's negligible.
But, well, it'll be higher than that because you'd be discounting each one of these savings because you're not gonna spend this cash. So it's not 2 million forward, it's the cumulative amount total. So I think the present value of the difference is probably close to $1 million.
Yeah, but it's all, keep in mind, when we defer principal, we have a slightly longer average life.
Yes, that's
right?
my,
But that's because we're choosing to have a slightly longer average life. Our debt, we're only gonna sell the first 5 years as non-callable.
7 or 8, but we're only making, we're deferring 2 of those years, so.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is like, we have the ability to call the debt, so you could always prepay it a little bit faster back here. If you guys look at the page that sort of explained it to me was for 2A and 2B, if you look at page 4, right?
Of the attachment?
Of the graphic, like
So-
this one right here, like which is, it may be hard to look.
Where is that in here?
No.
No.
That shows, that's this
Yeah,
difference
yeah,
right
no,
here.
Yeah, but when you say page
You're
4,
comparing 2A
you have
and
to be
2B?
more specific.
Yeah, so
On
on
the
scenario
PDF?
2A,
On the PDF, right?
On our
What
packet.
number in the PDF, do you know?
I think
I-
each
Not in
PDF
that.
is
Alright,
probably
try-
page 4.
yeah, it's page
So he
4.
said 7
The
individual
PDF,
PDFs
page
with each scenario,
62.
and
Sorry.
each one of those
Well,
PDFs has
Also,
six.
that graph is in our packet for tonight, too.
So
Right there.
it's,
Are you looking at the
62
graph?
PDF. Thank you.
yeah.
So if you compare,
18.
like, the 4th page of scenario 2A with the 4th page of scenario 2B, you can see like the real difference here is that we're either going from stepping up our debt service
Why so
from
hard?
15.5 this year. If we defer principal, then the next 2 years are kind of 17.5 million. And if we start paying principal, the next 2 years are about 19 million. And you can see that on the first page, right here that Josh handed out, at the very first page. If you look in fiscal 20, you can see in fiscal 26, we have 15.6 million. And if we defer principal in scenario A, we jump to like 17.7, 17.8. If we don't defer it, we jump to 19.1 and 19.3.
Yeah, so what, this
Yep.
shows it just not in graph
Yeah.
form.
Yeah.
So you can see it without having to flip between 2 graphs that are 50
Yep.
pages apart in the PDF.
Sorry.
We can see it
Yep.
without, I mean, you can see the difference. It's
Yeah.
17.8 versus 19.1,
Yeah.
17.8 versus 19.4.
So the difference
So the
next
question
year
is-
is a million, $1.4 million,
So
right?
the question is, are these near-term, is the near-term lower debt service in 2 years worth the present value difference? And that's the, I mean, that is, Jenny, do I have that right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the question is, how do you want to pay? Right? Do you want to pay, you want to create some cash flow savings now for the next year or 2 years and pay later? The present value, it's, I think I'd rather, instead of seeing it on a combined basis, I would have just rather seen it comparing the debt service on just this bond issue, but, or in these bands. And the bands aren't in here, right? These are just bonds.
No, it's
Yeah.
all debt service.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because those bands are gonna roll, right? We've got
So
some bands that are
Is
gonna
there any
roll, so there's
premium
another
in the
15
tick? Is there any
million that's
premium
not
in
in
the
here.
tick for a deferred principal?
Yeah, that's how we get to
Yeah.
yes. So
No.
it's a scale, it wasn't run at par. if that's
No,
your
no, I'm
question.
just saying, if I'm bidding the bond,
Yeah,
and I'm bidding A, deferred principal, am I gonna charge you more than B?
the math is yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
That's just the math because you're paying it all off and longer.
So
And that's the
we'd be
2 million
paying
or
a
4
higher
million?
rate on, so that's, okay, we'd be paying a higher rate on the entire bond as a result of the benefit of deferring for 2 years.
and just to note, like, on the note, that we're gonna be, the bands that we're gonna be rolling, and, I mean, HHR will hopefully be not 15 million, but like 6, right? We're gonna, by the time we get reimbursement, right?
That's
And
fine,
we've
yeah.
got Pear Tree that we're gonna roll.
Pear Tree is not gonna be a band.
It's not gonna be a band?
No.
Okay, so, you know, in projecting out what the next year's debt service for fiscal 28 is gonna be, you have to kind of also factor in the fact that we're gonna have some more debt to refund on here. And how does that layer in?
That's included in.
Yeah.
So you
So I've
run,
projected forward the 27 issue and the 28.
so the combined here is everything?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you look on page
Now, if you
3.
add more, this is what we know today, right?
Yeah.
If there's more to it, then we'll
Right.
adjust
We
it,
need to see the
because
whole
we
picture.
also have to adjust the notes. Right now, we have for the HHR 15 million.
Yeah, it's like 6 now.
It's down to 6,
Although
so that's gonna,
That may, depending
it
on
might
how-
tweak a little bit with,
Yeah.
but
Right.
it won't
Okay.
move them.
I guess the question is like, I think this board did a great job smoothing out our debt service and making it pretty level until the year, what is that, 2037. We got 10 years of, we've reshaped it. And the question is, do you still want to employ that deferral strategy when, I don't know, you've kind of accomplished your mission?
Plus, we have,
Or maybe you do 1 year.
plus we know we have more projects coming in the next
I was just going to ask,
number
yes.
of years, right, that aren't
Big
in
one.
in that
Yeah.
schedule.
Me
You've
too.
So
got a
whether it's
big one.
Middlesex, whether it's the high school, whether it's the storm and drain project,
Yeah,
there's a lot coming.
So that's the discussion between 2 and 3, not 2A versus 2B, because 2A and 2B are both level debt service.
but,
Deferred, not deferred.
right,
3 is low to high with, kind of gets you to level debt service, but it doesn't.
right, it's a
Um,
little choppy.
Yeah. And that's, A is deferred and B is not deferred.
Understood.
Uh,
But we're also talking about next year, we're looking at, hang on, 13 total, hang on. There's another, what was that, 16 million coming, there's a bunch, we have more capital coming here. I need to fix my formulas, but, we have a lot of other capital that we need to, it's probably, not all of it's gonna be bonded, but a fair amount of it. So when I think about layering in future debt, my general point is, we're already at a nice, pretty flat curve. Do you wanna keep postponing or deferring when I don't know that we don't have, we solved the problem, or I think, is before I
What's the
got-
benefit of deferring versus, we know
Yeah.
what the cost is?
So
Tell me why you would want to do it.
So I would defer, I would choose 2A, and I would defer in this bond issuance
Okay.
for 2 years, because by doing so, there's actually a savings to the taxpayer in terms of doing it, because we're at what I would describe as sort of the tail end of structuring around what was 20 years worth of level principal. And on the graphic, which as Ann pointed out, like is in this page 1 right here, you can kind of see we're at the very end, right here. John showed on that sort of what I call like a bridge right there, how like debt service is going up, but then debt service on our old is actually going down because it wasn't level, it was level principal. So that means the debt service itself goes down because your interest goes down every year. So I think we're at the very end of the tail of there being cash flow savings from deferring it, right? And then the difference here is it's $1.5 million, or sorry,
You could say
$1.4
$1.5
million, based on these rates and so forth, of choosing one, or the other. So that slide that we were looking at up there, John had next year's debt service versus this year's debt service. I think, did he say 2.6 or 2.7?
Yeah,
So this would make it only 1.4, so it'd be about $1 million lower.
at what point do you not do that anymore? Like, or
Yeah,
like-
I mean, you're,
Like, so
The
I
near term-
get it, I understand, that's like real savings, but we can always create cash flow savings by deferring principal. I can always do that.
but it's not savings.
It's
It's lower debt service in the near term
it's
at
cash
the
flow.
cost of higher debt service in the long term.
Yeah, it's
It's
not
not really,
net
you're not
present value
savings
savings,
the
it's just
taxpayer,
cash
you're
flow
just
savings.
deferring the tax.
And then
on
when
the taxpayer.
it's being used as a tool to sort of create.
Right, it's not a savings, it's a deferral.
Decision-making and the pain of it.
So like that, we could do that infinitum,
Yeah.
and that
Yes.
we'll always be able to do that. The question is,
So for 20 years, what this board chose to do was to take the cost of any project, and rather than it be 20-year level debt service, where you're spreading it equally over the next 20 years of taxpayers, this board chose to do level principal, which means
Declining.
it means the cost to the taxpayer in the first and second year was far greater than what the cost to the taxpayer was for that 20-year project in years like 19 and 20. So the town sort of chose to do that. So every project was, its debt service looked like this. So if you're looking on TV, it went like this. What we've done is we've chosen, I think it's been like 8 years now, where we've said, rather than funding where the debt service goes like this, we've said, we're gonna fund where the debt service goes like this. Straight. We're at the point where those two things are basically counteracting each other, and we effectively have level debt service, as you can see from like that graphic, right, or even right here, is just pretty much level for the next 10 years. So
It's pretty much level for the next 10 years, regardless of whether we defer or not. Because what we're we're just talking, so the benefit of deferring, to Jenny's point, I think, seems to have been already achieved. Because deferring, I'm not going level debt service versus level principal. I'm talking about deferring the first principal payment. The
Yep.
benefit of deferring the first principal payment seems to have already been accomplished, that regardless of what we do, we're gonna have relatively level debt.
But you see the difference in the first couple of years.
yeah,
Yeah,
It's
I do.
dramatic.
It is,
Yeah.
but there's, the reason it's, well, yes,
It
because
just-
we're deferring,
The principal.
we're deferring the principal.
Right.
So the overall cost of the issue is higher to us for the benefit of it
Right.
being less costly in the near term.
Right, and I think the additional perceived benefit, I'm not gonna call it a benefit, of the deferral is that it creates some distance between the decisions we're making and the pain that we feel in the budget. And I don't love that.
I agree with that. I agree with that.
and it's after 20 years of saying, we want the, I'll use your pain, but let's just say
Yeah.
the expense of a project,
Take pain.
we want it to be significantly front-loaded and grant sort of savings, if you will, 20 years
Well,
at
no,
the end
wait,
of the project.
So we're talking about two different things, right? So we're talking about deferring versus level debt service versus, so I think, I don't understand the benefit, I get the savings, but the overall benefit of deferring is, to me, is $1 now versus, we're saving $1 now, but we're paying $1.50 in total, right, to get that dollar savings now. And I don't understand why we should continue to do that. That's different from the discussion around level debt service versus level principal.
Right.
Okay, what you're talking about is doing this or doing this to the TV audience.
No, what I was saying is either for 20 years, we did what I called declining debt service, where you would issue bonds where debt service today is 100, next
Yeah.
year it's 95, 98.
Because we're level
90.
principal.
Yeah, so the only thing that really matters is debt service. So for 20 years, we did declining debt service, and here we're doing slightly increasing after 2 years, and then level after that. So, I mean, listen, the question on the table is, do we want to continue to do another year of 2 year of deferrals of principal, or do we want to start amortizing principal in 2027? The difference of it is sort of 1.4 million.
Wait, the difference in year one is 1.4 million. Right.
Yeah. Difference in year 2 is 1.5 million.
It's also
Right.
big. But
But
then it's
that
better.
decision cost the taxpayers $1.9 million over the course
period of time.
of the issue.
If you didn't, or you could just, we don't need to do that. We could step up the principal out in years, as you saw, like in the 3 A and 3B scenario, you could choose to just increase principal after year 10. Right, like you saw what they did in the low high structure, right?
I want to focus on A versus B before we get to 2 versus 3, okay?
Yeah.
Right, so we should
I'm a
just,
level
let's
debt.
limit the discussion
Yeah.
to A versus B.
Born and bred.
Level debt service?
I'm a level debt service person, born and bred.
So, but
So
the question is whether we
no
defer.
deferral, with no deferral.
I prefer not to defer. I'm not gonna die on my hill I mean, at least, I'm not gonna die on my hill for a 1-year deferral. I just don't, I think that, I'm not seeing the, for $1.4 million, particularly when, I don't know, I think this budget season's going pretty well. I think you take and we have a call option built in, we could always refi. My next question is, I know we have a couple of bond issues that are callable, and I know the rates haven't dropped yet, but maybe we can, that can be coming. So that's all. We have some flexibility to restructure, but
We might
I'm
have,
kind of like.
but we might have.
We might, yeah.
We don't know. We can't count on being able to call anything.
No,
Right.
but, well, we will eventually catch up to
You can always call something. The question is, can you refinance and save money?
Yeah, right.
Of course, I mean, yes.
So,
It would be, I mean, that was kind of.
So why don't we talk about fiscal year 2027,
I
one at a time?
think,
The choice to defer for 1 year is about $1.4 million, which is about, I think we're spending $165 million in taxes this year, so it's about 1%. Is that directionally correct?
I think as we're put on the hot seat to add capital projects throughout the year, I think we need to have a realistic picture of what that costs us every year. And I think trying to mask that by deferring is a bad idea. I think it's hard for us to defend ourselves and saying, sorry, but we can't do that right now, when it looks better than maybe it should, because we've pushed the principal. So I would argue that we should take our lumps
It's like
upfront.
buying furniture and not having to make your first payment for a year.
Right, exactly,
Right?
exactly.
So-
It makes it easier then to also buy something
Right.
else.
Well, to me, in my view, it's an overall capital project. Because like, every time we decide to bond, it's new capital, whether it's a new school, an island, or whether it's a fire truck, we're making the decision to not just pay for it today when we need it, to bond. So we have other items such as, we have 2 fire engines and harbor dredging, of which we can choose to, do we want to bond those? Or should we just be paying cash?
That's a different discussion than I'm talking about. I'm talking about whether or not to say yes to a project. Like, I think we're looking at an incredible debt load. And that's why we've had some difficult decisions made on this board to not participate in some capital projects. And I think I'm not in favor of trying to mask the impact of the decisions that we're making. So I think, especially if it costs more to the taxpayer over time, like, there's no reason.
Well, the last, I think, 5 bond issues we've done, we've all made that decision. So if we want to decide to stop making that, that's fine.
I'll admit I didn't know why we did it. I'm glad we're talking about it finally, and I think we maybe should consider stopping it personally.
I think it's the right thing. That's a great tool to defer principal. It's a great tool. And, but like I said, I think I'm pretty happy with what our debt service curve looks like. I think you've accomplished what that goal was. I just don't know that you need to keep doing it to save $1.3 million-ish, $1.4 million. I'm a level debt person, so I'm in favor of level debt. I just think keep it predictable and smooth. And as for deferring, I would rather not, but I'm not gonna, if this board votes to defer it, I'm gonna support what the board does, but I just think you pay for it. You pay for it. So, and I don't know that and then what's the curve look like if we pay it down?
Well, I think the notion of deferring for 1 year, like, if people are saying we shouldn't defer for any year, then
I'm okay with 1 year.
I guess what I'm saying is that then we're sort of, if there's no deferral, we will have $1.4 million of principal due in fiscal '27.
Right.
So if you don't defer it, then you're effectively paying to raise debt in the same year that you're actually doing it. So if you really wanted to save money, what you'd say is don't bond the whole thing, whatever your $1.4 million of principal that you have in the first year, just pay that much in cash, and then you save money by not actually bonding it because you're not paying interest on the amount that it's in the same year.
You can do that too.
Then it's just a question of like, well, can we invest the money at a higher than the first year coupon? Give the first year coupon. What do you have the premium coupons at in the first year? For the yields,
Fives.
you know?
Well, they're 5% coupons, they're probably
Something.
190.
From a yield perspective?
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of arbitrage benefit if you borrow at 2 in year 1 and you invest at 3.
Treasury.
But it's like the minimus it's on $1.4 million principal.
Yeah.
For a short period of time.
Yeah.
But you'll cover your costs,
Yeah.
at least. Yeah, I mean, if you want to defer a year, I'm okay with that. I think now is a good time to really to sit back and say, okay, I think the debt service curve is really in a great shape. And you can give I guess I want to see,
Can you say it's in shape, or it's in good shape because it's smooth?
yeah, I think it's pretty smooth, it's pretty
Even though
flat.
it's
I mean, we have, there's this next year's a little bit of a difference, 2027, but it's pretty flat.
Yeah, the only thing we're talking about is fiscal '27 and fiscal
Yeah.
'28, right? So
Yeah,
it's-
but like I said, if we defer it, that means then then we're kicking the principal up, it goes up to 19 million as opposed to 18 million, right? So I have to look out a little bit further, because when you defer principal, you kind of push the peak out.
Okay, so just so everybody sees, if you look at fiscal '29, which in the deferral principal, if we defer principal, the debt service would be 18.67 million. If we don't defer it, if we don't defer it, it's 18.67. If we do defer it, it's 18.72. So the differential there is about $50,000. So that's what it means like going forward.
Well, yeah, the question is, level debt means 19 million, we jump to 19 million, and then it starts to come down a little bit.
Yeah. Okay, so how do we want to make the decision here? I think we should first decide if we want to defer.
Yeah.
In '27 and defer in '28. So,
Let's do it.
Do it.
okay,
Oh.
so why don't we go backwards?
Do what?
So there's 2 years. It sounds like some people are thinking defer 1 year, some people are saying don't defer at all, some are saying defer 1 year, some are saying defer 2 years. So let's work backwards, who thinks we should defer the 2028, the fiscal '28, the second year of principal?
It'd be both years, right? Can't choose.
28, no, yeah.
27, 28?
There's like 3 choices,
Yeah.
defer nothing,
Defer the second year,
defer
defer 1
'27
year.
and '28, or defer just '27.
I'd be in favor of deferring 1 year,
Me too.
Is there a reason for that?
just to give us a little breathing room. I would say I hate to say it, but it's a split the difference kind of thing. Where, okay, deferring 2 years seems too much, and 1 year does give us a little bit of breathing room in this year. It'll help us a little bit with the overall debt service. So instead of probably going to 19 million, it'll probably go to 18.5.
Yeah, so for next meeting, I can run scenario 2C, lack of a
Yeah.
better term.
Yeah.
With the 1 year
I
deferral.
think we know
It's
what
okay.
we know what the numbers
Yeah.
are. This is, it feels
But
like
it
it's
give
more
you-
of a policy.
It's more
Yeah.
of it's
Yeah.
more of like the deferring, I think we're tapering off, it's really a policy decision or a policy change from using the deferral tool when you need to do some smoothing. If we ever need to do smoothing again, definitely bring it back. It's a great tool. Just don't know that we need it the most.
Does Moody's have a point of view on this?
No, they do look at the amortization, but, you know, it's sad to say, but that's not really a big part of their methodology,
No,
right?
no.
Your
No, I
grand
just
list,
like
they don't opine on that. They'll look at it. If you had bullet payments like all the time, they're like, wait,
no,
you're
I just,
paying.
the fiscal discipline is what we're talking about, right? Which is the fiscal discipline of
Yeah.
like, you know, not deferring because, you know, we're gonna start paying it back the minute we borrow it.
They don't
they
opine
don't-
on that. It's, state statutes allows you to do it. It's really not, you know, I don't pay taxes in Darien, but it's really not a huge difference in the aggregate of your budget. So they don't, you know, and you've always shown a willingness to pay, you know, from a Moody's perspective, so they have
What
the-
about other issuers, other towns that you work with?
Some defer, some don't. It's, you know, policy decisions on
I mean,
what
state
works best
statute,
for.
yeah, state statute's pretty tight. It basically says you
Yeah.
can't defer it for more than 2 years,
Right.
right? And then the second thing is you kind of really can't go any slower than level debt service.
Correct.
And you can't go any longer than 30 years. So the state statute, the GCS, basically puts you in a little bit of a box.
Correct.
To make sure that 169 towns don't like fall into disarray.
Right.
Right? And they set overall bonding limits as well, right?
Yes.
So.
Yeah, and, yeah, you're far away from your maximum state statute
So
allowance.
do folks generally support having a vote here in terms of whether we would defer principal only in fiscal '27 and then commence principal in the second year?
In favor of that.
I can support that.
Okay.
But I'd like to wean ourselves off of this, because I do think we should, whether Moody's cares about it or not, I think I'm more in favor of we borrow it, we start paying it back instead of deferring when we start paying it back. Because net, over the course of decades, we will save money by doing it that way. We will just save more money, because deferring costs us more to do.
Well, let's just be clear. Versus the 20 years that this was done prior to 8 years
Oh, yeah,
ago,
no, it's like night and day.
we saved even more money in what is a sort of perpetually upward sloping muni curve, right? Because we did level principal. So it's accelerated debt service,
Yeah,
right?
but again, that's level principal, that's not, okay. That's not deferring when the principal gets started. That's two different things. So yes, we did a great
Yeah.
job, okay? No fingers being pointed. I'm just saying that with respect to deferring, not whether it's level or not, deferring, I'd like to wean ourselves off of that. That's my point of view.
Okay. Well, so I think we're going to formally vote next year, next week, right? But let's just take a little vote here to recommend that the structure that gets presented for next week. I'll entertain a motion to recommend that the structure that gets presented next week defers principal only in fiscal year '27 and commences on the second anniversary date. Dan moves, Jenny seconds. All those in favor? All those against? Okay. So that's, if you could put that together for us to
Absolutely.
kind of vote on next year. And then, so then the question is, do we want to remain with in years 2 through 30, in years 2 through 20, do we want to have level debt service?
I'm a level.
Yes, because
honestly.
then that way you don't have these.
Budgeting.
you
I'm
don't
level,
have
I'm
all
fine
this,
with
and you don't
There's
have
no
these
additional cost to that
maintenance.
versus,
These
Well,
maintenance
Oh, yeah,
level
there is.
principal.
Sure there is.
there's,
There is.
So if you look on, it's the second to last page on the packet, compares,
These looking like this.
That's- yeah.
compares scenario 2A
Okay.
versus 3A. And 3A is the low to high instead of level debt.
And then you see a lot of 19s.
Right,
A lot of what? Oh,
19.
19 total debt.
Yeah, you're leveling off, your peak is from the high 18s, now it's the low 19s. That's the difference.
If we went to low to high versus level debt.
Correct.
The other thing we gotta keep in mind is Middlesex maybe down the road, right? And
Right.
any talk of a new police headquarters is gonna
Right.
be, so.
Yeah,
I
but-
think the 1 year, for me, the 1 year deferral at least gives us a little more insight into those two numbers. right? I know we have a 5-year capital plan out there, but I think the police, especially hearing that tonight, I want to see what that crystallized number is. Like, you know, Sharon, was it Sharon?
Sharon.
Starts putting together, you know, is that 5 million, is that 20 million?
Oh,
Right?
no, they're
I-
talking about scraping
Yeah.
the building.
No, no, I know,
Yeah,
I know, taking it all down.
Yeah.
Is that 30, is it 50, is it 20?
For what?
Scrape taking it all down.
You do
I don't even want to think about
It
it.
was 20 to build it, so that was a number of years ago.
It was
what?
8?
It was
Yeah,
20
it was-
million to build that.
Yeah.
No, it's
So
gonna be
I thought it was
7.
I don't know.
Unless we think
That's fine.
this discussion has an effect on choosing level
Level.
debt service.
Yep.
Or high to low, which if you've all looked at that, it's, let's just use, it's 10 years of of flat principal, and then 10 years of another flat principal. So what that is that effectively, within years 1 through 10, it accelerates debt service, because it's higher principal in the first 5 years versus the second 5 years. And then the second 10 years, from year 10 to year 20, it sort of like accelerates principal into years 10 through 15 versus principal years 15 through 20. So it's, I mean, Mark, is that right? You're kind of creating 2-level principal amortizations, right? On the
Yeah.
high-low.
Yes, and then you blend, it just becomes one offering. You do an internal schedule for that, yeah.
Jim, can I just raise something for listening to
Yes.
this? And I'll come up so they don't yell at me. We've already deferred some of these projects for interest only for years. Because every time we do a ban, all we're doing is paying interest on it. So some of these projects, like Great Island, even if you defer it 1 year, we've deferred paying principal on that for 3 years. And so when you're looking at the cost, I don't care about what you're doing over the last 30 years. I want to know what the 2 interest amounts were that we just paid interest only on, because that's also the cost to the taxpayer. In addition, this is a great year to just do exactly what Taylor's been talking about. With a 1.5 increase in our grand list, that's going to generate $2 to $3 million extra just at the old rate that we had. And so, yeah, we could cover the high expenses, but we knew those were happening. There was nothing in that Board of Selectmen budget that we didn't know was happening this year. So this is the year to bite the bullet and go, in my opinion, and several people from F&B, to just go and start paying back our principal, especially since we've been doing bans on some of these. So we've already been paying interest only on it. So that's just a different perspective. That plus the fact that our grand list is going to cover any increase in that debt service, just from a different perspective.
Okay. So I think the direction here, what I'm hearing is fiscal 27, we defer, level debt service thereafter. Right, and we'll go with the 2 tranches.
Yes.
One over 30 years, one
Yeah.
over 20 years.
Right.
I can support that, yeah.
Okay.
So we'll revisit this next week.
Yeah.
Yeah, We'll
We'll tighten up the numbers.
tighten up the numbers, so we have fresh off the presses, so I'll reduce the ban amount
Yeah.
for HHR, so you have a clearer picture of all that.
And then, is there anything circular in here in case, like, we'll have these conversations around possibly moving $1 million of H&R asphalt in? Would that just have the potential of shifting possibly $1 million of the ban to the bond?
I think you would just add it to the ban
Add it to the
with the
ban.
HHR, you keep that all as a ban?
I mean,
No, but I guess what I'm saying is, like, that's assuming we don't get a
Yeah.
ridiculously high reimbursement from the state on asphalt. That would mean that that's a $1 million more that we're spending. So I'm just saying, would we shift $1 million from?
So I think that the $1 million in the 27 budget for HHR, the additional work, would be kind of, if it's allowable, incorporated into the authorization that exists already. That way, there wouldn't need to be any new bonding for it. It would just kind of fall under the remaining leftover bond authorization.
No, but I'm saying from an actual getting the cash, we can either do it in a ban.
Well, we would do it in the ban. We wouldn't do a separate ban and bond for the same authorization.
Part of the reason why you're issuing bans for HHR is because you're still trying to figure out the final cost and potential grant opportunities. So, further, you can bond what you believe to be your net share right now. You can just bond it all, but next year,
Okay.
you might only have, there might be some spinach left over, and you're like, no, what do we do now? The town could probably pay cash for it, but the reason why we're issuing notes is because of the uncertainty of grants.
Okay, so if they did that, if the HHR chose to do that, then the effect would be to be taking $1 million out of the Board of Selectmen's capital project budget, right, for 27, and just increasing the ban amount?
Yeah, I might
By
talk
$1
to
Board of Education.
Board of
Board
Eds,
of
yeah.
Ed, not Board of Selectmen.
I might
Well, I
talk
think
to,
technically, yes.
I might talk to to Rich at the
Okay.
Board of Ed and see what their cash flow looks like for that, because, while we're running the ban, we're hoping to get that state grant reimbursement, and if
Got it, okay.
those expenses don't come in until after the fact, then we may not need to increase it by that much, but it's definitely
There's a long
requires
tail, there's a
redesign.
long tail to the reimbursement.
Oh, it is for sure.
The final reimbursement.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah.
And is there plan to do the parking lots this summer, or is it next summer?
I think you need to ask if when they,
Yeah,
And that's the
I'm
question.
assuming it was this summer
Yeah.
because they're doing everything else.
Gotcha.
So we'll find out.
Because then it makes sense to, if
They
you're
got
gonna
it,
borrow,
they're
then
opening.
borrow this
They're
year.
supposed,
They're
they're
opening
opening
it.
live September, which
Yeah.
would include
Yeah.
that. But if you're adding the parking lots, typically, that would be done in coordination with Ed, so.
I would think it's this summer.
Yeah, I would think
I'll
so
find out.
too.
Okay.
It should be.
Cool beans.
I can pull that out separately so you see what that impact would be for the 1.1 million for HHR parking lots / or capital, I'll put it.
Yeah.
It won't be a lot because the short-term rates are.
but we just be,
pretty good
the effect would be just adding $1 million-ish
to the
to the
notes.
ban.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I'll pull it out separately so you see it.
Okay.
And with that,
Any other?
When you're back next week, could you try to come up with a 1 or 2 page decision document rather than as well as these runs, but just so if you can summarize kind of in a single page kind of the decisions we have to make, that would be really helpful, like a PowerPoint slide or something like that.
I'll be honest with you, the decision, these are policy decisions.
Yeah.
They're not
No, I
my
know, but
opinion.
I understand that, but the difference between option A and option B, I'm just looking for something that's a
The
little
summary
bit
table.
easier to manage than
Yep.
the
Well, it sounds like
all the
we
tables.
sounds like we kind of made the decision around 1-year deferral and level debt service, but I think,
yeah. But we'll have some decisions to make next week.
What do you want to compare that to? What's the other decision?
Those are really the only choices that
yeah,
have to
these
be
are the
made.
only.
Okay, all right.
Would you like compare non-deferral, the 1 year versus no year deferral?
All right, let me just retract. I just don't want to have 65 pages to work through to figure out what
I had to
decisions
do
we
them,
need
so.
to make.
That
That's all,
was fun.
that's all. So if that's not going to happen next week, that's great, so.
Yeah,
No, we
but
can consolidate
Yeah.
the packet even further into just a one-pager.
That's,
Yeah, I think
that's what I'm
I
looking
think
for.
that thing
That's
is look-
definitely.
Yeah.
And I know
Thank you.
Taylor may
And
kill
not
me
that we
here.
don't appreciate the 65 page.
No, just
Well,
a
I-
summary table
Yeah.
that shows.
Yeah, just a summary table, that's all. A summary table of, yeah.
all the costs
So-
of each.
Maybe just one thing is if everybody just could look at the second page of what Josh handed out.
You're looking at
Yeah,
this?
the second page of what you handed out. On that top scenario A, now, mind you, we're going to include a principal payment in 2027. But just a couple things to point out, generally where we're looking at, assuming, I think there's a 3.5% increase to our budgets. One of the things that, at least, I focus on, I think we've all talked about, is what is our debt service as a percentage of our total expenditures, right? Because you know, we're kind of making these micro decisions around, do we defer this year or that? But in terms of the amount of debt that we actually have and what does that mean and what does it mean to be crowding out, like, we're generally going to be, you know, we'll shoot from 8.5% debt service as a percent of total expenditures up to something, you know, it'll have to be above 9.2 because we're going to add an extra $1.5 million of principal. Will that put us over 10%?
No, the only scenarios that did that was 3B, I think, put us over 10%.
So 2B, which is what we're looking at effectively, well, I guess we're,
Well, it's a blend.
so
Yeah,
what we.
Probably be
what-
around
yeah.
9.5 to 9.7 roughly,
Well,
because that's
yeah, it looks like
what
we'll be-
28 would be.
So just, in 2026, you go to the top table, we're at
Yeah.
8.5%.
Yep.
Under what we all just decided, since we're deferring principal in 27, if you look at 2A, we'll rise to 9.2%.
Yep.
And then let's jump down to the 2B scenario, since we're not deferring principal in year fiscal 28. So we'll go up to 9.7%.
Approximately, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So now, and then we start to taper off,
Yep.
right? Not necessarily, as Jenny has pointed out, like our debt service is kind of flat there, but it's because our expenditures are increasing. So just as we look at like debt service as a percentage of everything that we spend, we're kind of ticking up next to just below 10%, and then trailing, and then beginning to trail off.
So Dan, to answer
We
your
need to
question,
lower our
Moody's
budget then.
Moody's looks at that 10% threshold. So we start exceeding 10%, that's when they really, that's,
Well,
not that you can't afford it, but it is a benchmark for them. And with their scorecard, it'll lower that score a little bit.
well, then does it make, if we know that there's a lot of capital coming next year, does that make it worse to defer this year?
No, it actually makes it, like it's, the,
Kind of helps
The-
step
the-
it up.
This
Yeah.
argues to
No.
defer more, not less.
yeah.
So you're,
If
A
you,
is-
if you have a lot of capital coming in the next 2 years,
Then you're effectively deferring principal.
you'll have to defer,
To-
you'll have
so-
to defer those as
Yeah.
well.
That's a
It's
hard,
not-
that is a benefit of deferring,
yeah,
Yeah,
that's a
right?
tool.
Beyond
that you
just a
can use.
lower cost, it's the percentage against your
the
budget.
carrying cost, yeah.
Yeah. So if we're sitting here a year from now and budgets have gone up, expenditures have gone up by 3.5%, and we have to issue another bond issue, then, you know, we're kind of, we're just below 10%, right?
Which, back to what Taylor said, which suggests that the amount of debt that we're incurring is pushing against the amount of debt a AAA issuer should be incurring.
Yeah, unless. we're
Because we can only, I mean, at some point, right, if we can continue to issue debt, regardless of whether we defer principal, we're gonna trip the 10%.
Right.
And that's one benchmark. There's also.
No, I know, there's a bunch of them,
Right.
there's a bunch of
Yeah.
them, but, you know, we're already a lot
So that
of
when
them
you're
were-
tripping it, when you look at as a percentage of your grand list, you're well below.
No,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I've seen that grid. Where we're positive, we're so positive
Right.
that it outweighs the fact that most of them don't support AAA, they support AA, right?
I don't necessarily think this should change our thinking here. I just wanted everybody to kind of just be aware, like where we directionally are, like deferring 1 year or another year isn't going to change it materially, but just from the overall quantum of debt,
Keep an eye
it's
on it.
approaching. And so
No,
we'll
it's a good-
we'll have other discussions as we talk about like fire trucks, like, you know, I'm saying smaller capital, like, right? That we have sometimes bonded and sometimes not bonded. Maybe we need to think about, like, you know, should we go back to, you know, when our debt was so low, we were bonding $1 million fire trucks. When our debt is higher, maybe we need to think about
In tax,
accruing for it, right?
No.
it's 10 o'clock.
We'll cut
Paying
that
for
line
cat-
out.
paying
Sorry,
for
sorry,
the
wait,
cash.
accruing. I should say paying for it in tax dollars rather than the bond dollars.
Right.
But,
Yeah.
you know, but it's another decision, fire truck specifically, because it's such a long lead time.
Yeah.
We don't want to, you know, we got to think about what does it mean to tax today, let it sit in the account for 3 years and then pay for the fire truck. But let's just make sure we look at this. And then also like in Mark and his like the individual packets that he put together for each of these, or Mark and Josh, you'll see like towards the back end of these, he has a scenario when he looks at the debt burden as a function of a grand list, which is another one of the Moody's scenarios where we're like super well
below that.
We're down there, but let's just,
Your grand list is carrying,
Yeah.
obviously, your wealth levels and all that stuff is carrying the rating.
we need to keep thinking about like the micro policy decisions, but also like high level, what does our debt look like in the eyes of the agencies?
That's why
I
we
do want
initially,
to go back to the fire engines. The reason we did this is we want the people who are getting use of the fire engine paying for it. In addition, when we have the 4-year by bonding it, depending upon what our general fund is, there always is the option, which Jim had mentioned earlier, to rescind the debt and make an appropriation out of the general fund to pay for it for that year if we don't want to bond it. But the cash flow on that was significant, which is part of the reason why we bonded it, as well as having the people for the 20 years, 25 years they're getting it, not having somebody like myself, who's not going to be here in 25 years, paying for a fire engine today. We want the people who are getting use of the asset to pay for the asset.
Okay.
but that's why we put the whole package together, so that you could see the carrying costs and the debt burden to the grand list.
Yeah,
That's,
no, I get it.
so I apologize for.
No, listen,
I
that's
love
becoming a
you.
bigger portion of our overall budget, because we're going
I
through a
strive
wave of
to do
heavy
this,
capital
you know?
investment, right? So,
As John Zagrodzky said, we have a little indigestion on some of this debt, so, but I think,
Yeah, the conversation has to be more about whether or not we do some of these projects right now versus what is the shape of this curve look
there you
like.
go. That's right.
All right, let's do this.
I'll work those up and make sure you have them before the meeting. so
Okay.
you can-
and with
the
respect to
summary.
things like the the POS and so forth, that all being in good shape, the audit being built into their,
Yeah.
Yeah, we're in really good shape now that we know we're going level debt service. I
Yep.
now know I'm gonna set it up with Lot A, Lot B, or Series A, Series B, whatever.
Okay.
I'll talk to Marie Phelan about that.
Josh, can you make sure we all get a copy of the OM once it's printed?
VOS?
Yeah.
Once the draft or
No,
the?
no, the final. Like, this
Absolutely.
is-
Yeah, of course.
We haven't gotten them in the past.
Okay,
We
sure.
could always ask for them, but.
No, absolutely,
if you
yeah.
just bring them to the next meeting.
Sure.
Thanks.
Yeah, we've really reduced the print versions of it. There's,
I have one.
yeah, we used to print 100,
I'm
you know?
asking for 7.
Go to the printer.
But if you want to print it, yeah, we can,
Yes.
I can make sure we add some,
Printed.
yeah,
we
okay.
can make it half a dozen.
That's fine, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
This was great. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
I know there's a lot of policy discussion in here beyond
That's
just
good.
the numbers, but
That's
it's,
good.
appreciate the help here, so.
Of course.
So on that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
That's good.
Jenny moves, Malin seconds. All those in favor? Unanimous.
I didn't vote.